حاليا ناس الناس حيزم نتي زنبرة سرعات اليوم ناس الناس حيزم صعود اليوم عليه. سلزي أبزي استفعل عليه الرجالات ويكاني أسعى أسماء مسوق سجدي أستوى الكنزي الشراني تقال لي نتي ساعة زبل مالي. كمقول استفعل عليه ولا وقحتها زبل استفعل عليه بس مثلا زي سمعت دي أتم زي مهنيات يكون موجود معه. تقال لي زبال يوم جديد أبصح الجوار أستاذ 3 عامل سنة استفعل عليه الشروطاتن لمدتاتن ناقص أكس حيزو ناقص أكس من الزهانة ساي مقصاص كاني سرعتي باركة أتكلم عن الناس مثلا لما يتحقق كتزاحله ويكان أزمة كمسألة أتحقق عندي جواري حركين يتحقق وانيمنا زحازة جيرو نتهزبي كردي ويكان نتهزبي من الملوك تجديله معه. سلسلة إذن أي ساعة زبل ويأتي تجادل أي زبل جالن أي ردي تردي يريد معه. إذن تجادل أي نتهاجر كله أكتوش تهاجر زولا تتهزبل وارن نتوقعن نسوا ما حاجه نسوا كم بليو تزوجوا مقام في وكردا ثانية. سلسلة إذن تجادل أي إذن أي ساعة زبل كابتو تجادل أي فريزة بنا لغير انتهاج عليه. أفتي جدلين جدلاو نسين نوع زي سنة أستاذ كلتا عمل سنة. سلسلة كابت حولة تسر نوع زي تفريس للسنة مسمى يبغو مسباهلو مسكوا تطلع حولة تسر بزح زي كبار. سلسلة إذن أي تسعة زبال يتجدد لي مديبوا ذل الحجر تواني غير خاصة ذل الحجر في سرحان دخل أقول بدوها وقولي معي. سلسلة إذا بدوها وقولي خاني يتخبرتاتن بهلتاتن ناي حولة تسر كتنقف كله عدد كبس لزخل ولا بزحيلهم ببقعاتهم زماتاتهم سلسلة ناي تسعة زبال كاب عشرات ثلاثة أربعة درجة عدمة سلسلة كل عين بقعات سلسلة السراوي تزيك إلا نيكو ما يدري ممكن هذا كنت آيس على الوضعين بحمل شاشة خاب السراوي إلا أنزلوا فيه لازم ممكن تزيك مثال ما تتجاهل تقول واني نايت هذا نايجز أرسلهم أقبل الله عليه بدحريه إذا هذا رزيا هانس أتقولون هم تبليوتو لكن ناتوري رأي بيرو هانس عند كراوين لازم سأقولوا كدالو سلسلة إذا هذا راوي بس من أول يقول مالك أجر أو أبو بلس مدما مشو تصاب بيرمس مهراني واتسايد بعد كله هذا قال موراسي من أبناء أخري أول موراس كاني ولا جها ويكاني أيها كان تعملوا صفات اللون يملوا صفات أبوها جزات اليوم جزاء يوسكا إذا أنت تعرف تجارب كاني ويكان الشعبي أسبها ويجي في بعض سببما زلوا يزور زلوا سلازي واتسايد زميل من يسيك مسنير سلازي نزي واتسايد زميلك على هنزلوا نحب عليه سواء بحال أنتي أبرفق زبالة وكان أجاش وارك أفريقيا بالنسبة للسخاوة أنتي خمس مريا أزلنا هنسات أستهانة سلا زي أمجمع أبدي يقال تدينا بقى بدبريدي هذيك بس هنسات أستهانة سلا بولويا سلادي أبدا إذا ودا dia minta kerjaan saya kan jahan kurang kerjaan saya wala معلومون قوم يقول أنت قرأ ثاني نعمل قرأ على ذاتنا الزرع استفاد عليه هذا استفاد عليه جزية بس هذا جد بحاجة جزية بس الحاجة قرأ عليه مثلاً حاجة عينك بقعة فيديوز كل عينك شريحه أو حاجة عينك تعمل فيديوز لذلك إذا قرأ ثاني استفاد عليه وتاتا زواتا عدتها تتأكد من الشيء حاجة عينك مجدي وهي حاجة عينك تلوه وهي حاجة عينك وعزوز لو ما تسير كانوا بالنت زفل على وضع عمل. سلسلة نبدي أصل حسين منك وكان منك من سير كمين لحد عينا. إتي كايتي ساعات البحر مساعدهم زدار إدميو ترى أبنائهم زنبرة نايتي ساعات ما تسا قال هين تزورهم سلسلة نبرة قبل تعالوا أكتي في زناسنا تعيد ما زنبرة بزح عدد تمرت زي أخره أكتي ساعات هم يلاقون أول كتو زي نور سلسلة قتل أول تنزل أكتي حولة تسمون كم زوارون بهني قوي سلسلة عادات النبرة بزي زوارون زنبرة من زمان سيدي نبذها وذاتي عن قوة تلاقي معي نبذي عن قوة دم أفتها بر قديتا وزي قبله تكون روح حيوم من نبذها تكون إيده موجود ዝኾነ ነገር ኣይምልከቶ ኤሳ ኣይምልከቶ ስራሕ ኣይምልከቶ ብዝብል ዝነበረ ጎስጓስ ኣዋጃቱ ድማ እዚ መንእሰይ ብድልየቱ ተገዲዱ ንሳዋ ዝበሃል ክፍል ላዕሊ ያንጋ ወይ ስራዕ ንብላ ናብዚኣ ክወርድ ወይ ከዓ ክወርድ ተገይዱ ማለት ስለዚ ነዚ መንእሰይ እዚ ከ ብኸመይ ዝቕበሎ ምክንያቱ ካብ መላእ ሃገር ዝመፀ እዩ ንኡስ ዕድመት ዘለዎ መንእሰይ እዩ ኣብቲ ናይ መጀመርያ ቀዳማይ ዙርያ ካብ ከተማታት ዝተኣከበ እንተነበረ እቲ ካብ ከተማታት ዝተኣከበ ድማ ብቕዓት ትምህርቲ ዝነበሮ ደረጅኡ እውን ዕድሚኡ እውን ብልዕ ዘበለ ዘመዛዝን ነይሩ ነቲ ስርዓት ፈላልዩ ዝብል ነይሩ እታ ሃገር እውን ናበይ ገፃ ከምተምርሕ ገምጋም ዝነበሮ ገለ ህንቲ ዝነበሮ መንእሰይ እዩ እዚ መንእሰይ እዚ ድማ ኣብታ ናይ ቀዳማይ ዙርያ ዓብዪ ጉድሮ ይኮይኑ ነዚ ዓላማ ነዚ ህንፃ እዚ ክሃንፅ ዘድልየ ወይ ነዚ ሕጂ ዘለናዮ ጉዕዞ ከጓዕዝ ዝተበገሰ ዓብዪ ጉድሮ ኮይኑ ነዚ ዓላማ እዚ ከዓኒ ብዝተፈላለየ ፀቕጢ ብዝተፈላለየ ስራሕ እኳ እንተሃነፆ ኣብ መወዳእታ ግን ዳርጋ ኣይተዓወትኩሉን ብዝብል እዚ መንእሰይ እዚ ማዳ ሃገር እዩ ዝብል ኣብ መደምደምታ እዚ ሳጓዚ ዓላሚት ይርትይዎ ብድሕሪ ናብቶም ዝቐፀሉ ዝበለ እንድሕር ኢና ግን እዞም ዙርያታት እዚኣቶም ብልኡማት ክኸውን ንድሕር ኮይኑ ወይ ከም ዝተባሃሉ ስስኑ እንተኮይኑ እንታይ ክግበር ዘለዎ ዝብል ዓብዪ ታሪክ ተባሂሉ ስለዚ ውርድ ምስ በለ ካብ ማንኪና ገና ከይወረደ ከሎ እዚ መንእሰይ እዚ በቃ ጉባኤ ይገብር እየ ንሃገረይ ከበርክት እየ ዝመፀ ጉዱላን ብበፅም ቅበልዎ ተገይሩ ማለት እዩ ስለዚ ሓዱሽ ነገር እዩ እዚ መንእሰይ እዚ መንእሰይ ስለምንታይ ጉዱላ ብበፅም ዝቅበልዎ ዘሎ ምክንያቱ እዚ ሰብ እዚ ርእሰ ተኣማንነቱ ዝፈልጥ መንእሰይ እዩ ኣብ ወዲ 18 ደቂሳ ዘሎ እዩ ስለዚ እቲ ናቱ መንነቱ እቲ ናቱ ርእሲ ዝጠፍእ ኣሎ እቲ ሓያል እየ ዝብል እቲ ክሰርሕ ይኽእል እየ ዝብል በቃ ዝተባሃሉ ዝገብር ዓይነት ንኸውን ብበፅም ይቕበሎ በዚ ምክንያት ከዓኒ ንምሕዝቡ ኣዘይ የናኽሳ ሓቢሎም ወዝዕዎ መጀመርያ ዝብልዎ ቁልፉ ከዓ ኣውፅያ ወዲ ሰብኣይ ተባሂሉ ከዓ ቁልፉ ምውፃእ ተጀሚሩ እታ ጉዕዞ ኣብዚኣ ትጅምር ማለት ምክንያቱ ቁልፉ እንድሕር ኣውፅኢሞ ብፀጋማይ ኢዱ ስሮ ክሕዝ እንድሕር ጀሚሩ ሰብኣውነቱ የጥፍእ ኣሎ ማለት እዩ ብሓንቲ ኢዱ ሓደ ነገር ብቕዓቱ ይጎድል ኣሎ በዚ ብካልእ እንዳገበሩ ኣብ መወዳእታ እውን ንኽዕለም እንድሕር ኮይኑ ርእሱ ክላፅ ኣሎ ርእሱ እውን ብሓንቲ ላማ ዳርጋ ሓይሊ ሙሉእ ከም ዝላፀ ገይሮም ግዴታ ኣይላፅዋ በዚ ኣይገብር እንተይከዓ ግበር ኣይትበል እንዳተባሃልካ ብበትርን ብስላዕን ብመቕፃዕትን ሰቲኻ ፀሪኻ ክገብሮ ከም ዘለካ ትግበር ማለት እዩ ስለዚ እቲ ሰብኣውነት ዝበሃል እቲ ናይ መንእሰይ ሓይሊ ዝበሃል እቲ ኣብ ነፅካ ምጥዕማን ዝበሃል እንዳፅዎ ይኮኑ ማለት እዩ ሕሉ ሓሊፍዎ ዘይእዘን ካብ ኩንነት ወፃኢ ይውፅዙኻ ምክንያቱም ኣፍቀዳይ ቁሩብ ኣንፈት ዘለዎም ዝብልዎ ዘጠራጠሮ መንእሰይ ንዓነ ዝጎበጎ ንምስኦም ይበሃል ንጎባ ይኩነት እዩ ኣብ ኩንነት የለ ከም ሰብ እውን ኣይተሓስበለ እዚ እንታይ እዩ ዝበሃል ዘሎ ኢልካ ነዚ ከም ክልተ ኢኻ ትምልሶ ግበር ኣይትግበር ተባሂልካ ምስ ተቐፅዓኻ ግን ፈቲኻ ፀሪኻ ነቲ ጎቦ ክትምፀስ ስለዚ እዚ እንታይ ዘርደካ ነቲ ጎቦ ክትምፀ ኣይኮነን ግን ዝተባሃልካዮ ይግባእ ጎቦ ክትምፅ ድሕር ጀሚርካ ሰብ ተባሂልካ ኣትሪኻ ማለት እዩ ስለዚ በዚ እንዳተሃነፀ እዚ መንእሰይ ናብ ዘይውዳእ መቕፃዕቲ እንዳተው እቲ መቕፃዕቲ እውን ሳዋ ዝወረደ ፀሓይ ሳዋ ዘይፈልጥ የለን ፀፀር ሳዋን ፀሓይ ሳዋን ጎልጎል ሳዋን ዘይፈልጥ የለን እሞ ከዓኒ ኣብ ፋዱስ ኣብ ሰዓት ሓደ ክፅዕ ከለካ ሳዋ ኣለዋቲ ኣለት ስለዚ እዚ ኩሉ ዓይነት መቕፃዕቲ እዚ እንዳገበሩ ከምቲ ንሶም ዝደልይዎ ገረምና ኣብ መወዳእታ እውን ብኣመጋግባን ማይን እዩ ምክንያቱ ማይን ምግብን ኣብቲ ግዜቲ ይፍላል ኣብቲ ናይ ዙርያታት ዝገበሩ ዓይነት ዙርያ ተሳኢኑ ዘይኮነ ኮነ ኢልካ ነቲ መንእሰይ ብዛዕባ ኣብቲቡ ከይሓስብ ብዛዕባ መፃኢኡ ከይዘራርብ እዚ ኩንነት ቁኑዕ ኣይኮነን ንኸይድን ኣብ ማይን ኣብ ምግብን ምበኣስ ተብተሕልፎ መንሕልፉ ከምዘይረኣዳ እዮም ሓንቲ ቦት ነፂኣ ንቦጥሎም ሙሉእ ሓንቲ ቦት የዳሉ ኣብኣ ከዓኒ ነዳቦት ኣነ ዝበል እንዳበልካ ከምዝበኣስ ይገብሮ ስለዚ ኩሉ እምነትካ ከምዝጠፍእ ትገብሩ ኣብ መወዳእታ ንሶም ኣብ ልዕልኻ ንሶም እዮም ቃል ዝኮኑ ማለት እዩ ንጉሳት ዝኮኑ ካልእ ዝኾነ ሕማማት ኣብቲ ቦታ ንሱ ተቐባልነት እዩ ወዲ ሰብ ኣብ ዝኾነ ቦታ ይሓምም ዝተፈላለዩ ዳሽታት መፁ እዩ እዚ ግን ከም ሽጣራታት እዩ ዝረአ ምክንያቱ ኣብ ቀዳማይ ዙርያ ኩሎም ቡድናታት በቃ ኩሎም ከም ኣሉታ ነገር ስለዝተቐመጡ ኣብዚ ዙርያታት እውን እግሩ ይሕመም ዓይኒ ይሕመም ካልእ ሕማም ይሃልዎ ተቐባልነት እዩ ምክንያት ዝበሃል እዩ ሕክምና ከይድ እውን ኣይትከለከል ስለዚ ካብዚ ጉዮዋንካ ተተሪፍካ ከዓኒ ፋዱስ ኣለዎ በዚ ኩሉ ነገር ምዃን ምስ ኣበየካ ስጋብ ትመውት ኢኻ ናብቲ ዝበልካ ትበዓል ኣብኡ በቃ ሃልዋትካ ምስ ተጥበኻ ምስ ወደቃ ጥራሕ ተሸኪሞና ሕክምና ወስኻ እዘይኮነ ግን ናብ ሕክምና ከይድ ሓይምካ ኣለካ ተባሂሉ ዝፍቀደካ ዳርጋ ኣዝዩ ኣዝዩ ፀቢብ እዩ ኣብ መወዳእታ በዚ ነገራት እዚ ተሓሊፍካ ዝተባሃልካዮ ትገብር ምኡዙዝ ዘይሓትት ناقص حسب زين ويك عارف مالك أبزيد زولا سنة كنا ما قبل ما كنا يكون حتى الحراس كفلا ما قبل ما قبل متى ما زي ما عايش متى ما عارف الدوام قال لي هذا هو أبي سنة حاجة نسيبها لكن نتنا تقول لنا فوق اسمه يعني أنتي وها كلهم تحيز قبل وهي أفتنا كل بس لذي دولة كاي ولا نتاع يقولون يبقى مساعدهم كناس أنتوا نسوي حاجة فوق حاجة فوق فاضيهم كذا زين كلنا نحكي ولو حتى كانت معاه هيكاو ما تساعد زي كويس ولا سكر بدحري يوزقوا تعليم حالفة هجرا هو قبل بتوعي كان أفتن وتهدراوي مع السرعة ويكاني كفل تعرفون توزعها أفتحوا توزعها تجاهل إن هذا بلوت نزل عبي درجة على إتي كم زي جبارين تجاهل إن زنا ورنبي أفتحوا تجاهل إن أبو بلوت نزل درجة إتي أبو بلوت بعلو بناوس كلامو على وسو بيني إذا كان لك بالك ما قالوا أو بيني زمكان وتهدراو من الناس خاصين سلازي بس كل نجاح مخر حالس قالوا واحد زيادة كمان إن هذه تصاور وتبدله بحرية عمل شيء شهر هذا قاعد يصير فينا بحرية عطوا له نعمله نقول له تصاور هذا كذا أما ده تابين لذي كل مسحاله سلاب أم شيء تجاه مختصو سلاب واحد تجاه تايمين عمل شيء شهر هذا قاعد نبدأ مرات نبعد طاقم من الناس معه إذا أبغى هم شيء تجاه نتاعي نيرو أكيد نص مالدي إذا مجاهد زبان بعلم فترة وين جاهد زول ويجي محبوس هنا متقولة دي جاهد نداول كهم شيء مثل نداول تتحولهم لتم تقالد كذا وهم قدروا من جميع مالي شنو أمور ده عشان اللباس نحاول اللباس أنتم سلام ده يجينا من اللباس نيرو إذا تقولوا لي نتي أقول من زبان أنتم قلنا ديزين كفاراتهم يسوون يجولون سلسلة وانا أقول في فوق نادي أنتم قلنا تقول أسوأ سلسلة كمان أمور ده لكن أمور سنازلون نحاول كذا كيلو kita kadang belajar sama karya. Dia nak menggunakan belajar sama karya. Tapi di hal kesina amor dia ada akta mata. Dan saya ada faktor bayu. Utom naik saat baru. Aman sebenarnya hukum. Esfa dia awalnya kalau wahan tu cuma ikon mengarut. Kata orang naik harga tu tina itu baru tu. Nabe ya. Zaman itu hiwat temani so. Dahan zaman hiwat buat sedang jemur. Ada saya nama harus. Jadi syukur zaman syukur. Lalu buku umur dia. Istilahnya ada zibah zai orang. بتوم نايتي زلوا لكاي وادلو نزهاجة تاني أكتر ما تدون زي نداوري أزبيت تفعل عليه سارة زبالة أبو توافيهم زحمة من السيارة بقول بقصرهم جمر نلوسهم كون نتمنى زحنيا أتمنى زي مقام مسرعي نتمنى ونأبدي نترداي أري أمور ده تايري مسرع نزوم من السيارة زيادة وكذا ما تقوليهم هنا يصحب شنو ده زحنا نقوله زي دول من السيارة ويتاني ويتكني أتتراعيهم زمان سيف كفاية بلاد اليوم حبيبي كم بالكاني زمان سيف جاب قبل خدمات كلها يقولون من ناري أخذاني هذا نقدر نحل منه صانع أول ما تزمن أب تكعن شو مثلا ميازيا أول ما تقول سب تتطلعوا دماغ كابتن نايجي ساعات بنايم كسب دمرة واحد شوية فهم سيف كلام ده حتى لو من صومين لذي إذا كاب نايجي ساعات كسب دمرة واحد شوية لو أبدا تكعن شو مثلا بلادنا كلها تبتعبوا نسمع رامسواتو نابد بزنور وهاب صحهم تجمع كده نابد بزنور وهاب صحهم تستوعبوا بدحريو زبان غني يوم جواب يسمع أزياد حلم سلسلة سؤال تتابع برالوا kita ورا كيف تعلم لذي سهرة بعدين على بعد نعمل زيادة ما أقدر جايين تقابل هذا يعني راجل ويعني في ناس نخافتنا ينابو بيلنا دون سوادال دوّنا زتادالو بعدين على بعد بروجكت هنا لازم ما تنسوا زمان زيادة مزوجة مثلاً زمان عيدا على الموجود كدان كأهون أي نورم أما إذا هذا قصة دلهم بزي أكتي مسافرات زاوية من أنفعها أصدق زمان زيادة يبعلم شو ما يزوريا أبو قالوا بعدها أبو كروس زي زمان النظر يوم نفعله وزمان كتوس السوالون حالاتي ما يفوز نحن هذا كده وقت أنا بفعها أبو قام زلوا كده أبفعها أنا بسلا يقدر عايزة كنت زي ما هذا شيء هذا يوم تي ناتهم الدنيا زنبرة ويكأنك تفيدهم زورها تخاونون زي بني عن كلا ورا سلسلة ورا نبرة قتي أبدي كأني بغني ترى حسيبون بدي عندهم بزوج شحتاك يبرروا لازم أنا سيدي نمر عادي نمر فول مالي أبدو كنا تار فريقكم قبلكم لا يتحسس بقى لو فلين نتامسي هم ده طبعا بدي وانا أكيد ناقص سرعة تاني أبدي نوم إذا مسك قاعد بقى يروشوا من يوم مالي زيادة لو تم سبعة نصفات راح يكون لا تزالوا من سيمو كرعي سلزلوا موزز كوي مخيف سلزلوا بزين مخالف الربوم جميلهم كل حاجة يكون مع عندك أنت مع السلس مع عندي أوليكم قبائل منهم زي كده هو حسب حادثة حادثة تقوين زي موزز تقوين بقى كريشين يدرو لما هاي تقوم يدرو سلسي كم تيجي أقول نزل زي أريدهم ما بدفعوا الزوار هذه وعلى سلام وكان بديناي وعلى أجيال المستعد كسمون إزمة سيدي كفانو كلواني وهي إذا كنا في أفريقيا سعدنا إزمة العائلة زحافية زحاف المستعد تأثر تقلبهم قلب سلسلة قوام قلبهم سلسلة زمان وعبيهم بشيء كمان يتجازع عني بهلو أكيد سلسلة إزمة سيادة جاءوا تتمنيشهم لذي كتبوا لذي نخيطوا واجد هو تعامل جواب تحصل على قانون الأجندة مفتاح لهم. سلزي ببعض السنين بأول نقالوا هذا متياس مجبرينا يوموز ولقوا هابوكمي جزاهم تحجلوكمي جلد زمو بس عادة تمسكوا زي تقولوا خاني عمل دامتو لازم نسي عمل ساعة من جوا بدي كان الناس أبو بكر يشتغل يوم الناس أبو بكر كابتي نحلاتي جزا هنسا منات جميل سجاب جربيناتهم حريشهم حساب كل نجاراتهم من عن فلان يسرعوا ميروما لذي أي سرعة من هذه كهاني تهابس البال بتاعي كم تنسون زدوا وجيرك كم تنسون زدوا وجيرك فتا تهابس البال أحد يسكن مسام كم تنسون موسى زدوا هذا لو هم أقول كان بقوة تهابس البال بتاعي نوايد أنا زوجك أهم تاني إذا نحري سيرك زي نحري زي جزء كهاني إذا أبزين اللي عندنا أقول جنراتين عندراتين أفوق هذا يعيش سميه نصفان استهانسا يشوف الأقالو أبي على الكاني سعر الأجرخان بإلكتريك بسفرها بميت من جوات ساعاني كم تسبب المدة عزيزك وبيكا حسب من حوارو نعم تسفان أولون وحدات من ساعتهم عليك سلازي إذا كل نجار قبل إذا ما نسي نفس الظروف ما أتيت تغير الحدانا كنت عمل 3 عام ونص أما وداتا المثال ساعة دولار دولار أي فتى كان يزبله لازم يوصل لورا زماري أبوي دارن زعبي نو كم زي فلت ولا سدوق قليل لازم سدار دي كانوا راح نشوف السيد غيري بس أنا أبغى نتعين إذا زوا هواون بزح حاجة وانا من حاجة ولا نسخة 3 معدين من حدش 3 معد أنا جوزا أفتح جزاز تسعين أفتح جزاز تسعين وكم تك سلام كم بتصير يقول لي سنة صور سعيد تقدر نقول إذا من ساعات كابس تروم يوم نايم أو تفطر لم يوم سلسلة زاسدراتيا تسعون الصحات زيكون تكمل تاني كده زاسدراتي تقول رأسي 300 400 دولار خارجي مو 150 و100 دهابي 300 400 ناس زاسدراتيا نكاف سبعة أفاجي مستسرعات ممكن يجيبها بنقصنا قبل بلنا خمسة يجيبها أما رأس قايل لا الصحات الشن حدا يقول لا 300 ناقة نحزبها مسلم ويأخذ مسلم بس يجيبوا يعني نتسدراتي دون الحجم صح كان يجيبوا تسمى ده كان زي الجماعة نحن نتاسمي كمان إحساسمي جوا نحن تي حدنا هواي كأقول لك كمان أم شمي جوا كمان ما أسمعتها ما أستيقظ سنة كهذا كمان يقولوا لك جاها ما أسمعتها خير هذا ولا ترى هذا مع التحقيق وين أفتح سوية ذات كم تدرك وين أنا أفتح مسدبا ويهم ما أفتح مسدبا بحال حاليا أو حاليا كم تأخذ كمان سلزي إذي أسدمامي قلت أو نايتين بزيك يستفرن له إذي لد بالي عن زارنا قبل حين عملت دكنستي عندي دكنستيو بتنقر وسعات قالي سنز بحاله أبسحل ناقفان كرتة زبالة أبناء سنة نسواتهم فرأي ودي إلى أول الزرميون راح يدن السرفة ناخذ زمان أبسجل السبيازلوا بدك أنول أي محاولون الناس بدك أنول ناس هذا هو بطولة جديدة هذا سوا زخول وسعان تسعون من سورة بنايس المرأة والحمام سب لو زبالة اللي حيل زخير الحمام يقطع 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 الشكمة زحف من سير بنا مرتين زورا أنا بس لدينا الذي يكون بديهن يحطوا عليه الذي بديهن حريفون أو مقطعهم نايلين متحدثهم كلنا قادمهم زيهم وانا قريب الذي أتم بديهن كلام كل بديهن كابت حريفا التعليم والدين ونوار تتوزع عنهم كابت على حساب الزحابة كابت ما راح يحصلوا لا تخافوا نامرتهم لازم يكون ده هاي كلا كل شيء جراتي أب زبالة حتى وانا سيكون أبنت أنا كم مثال أبنت أبو سوان هم كيرا بذكر وازلوا أما داتا مستنسل كي سدرا نفس سدرا يجوز فانوار وانا سيكون ده وانا سيكون زيا نفس سدرا مستلت كل ده جالس على فوتو ريا بدي حد يجي من وقت تروحون كم تيجي كل ده بس أبدي كده تامن أبدي كده عالم من وقت كم مقام كده سلازي أمور ده زوجة مثال نبرهم بخوف في الأوسين نسوا بعض كوف مثلا كريتة كده تقولي سعدي حسب الحوار في كيدو نجار أكبر أول عاد شكيم عن الساعة كريتة كده تقولي ساعة تعرف حوار بتعني زين زين بنفسنا أي ناس نرأي أو عبد الله أخوينا أيضا نو نتحدث عن واحد نرأي إذا كل عمل تاعي الثاني إذا كل نجار بهذا الحليفة أتم حياته بس هدول كل نجار مسرائيل تفهم مسرائيل كل نجار مسرائيل قالوا بيجي أنا أحد يهون نعمة أي سهون باولة اللي جابك يتخلص جورتون مسا مستملست جزاء مستملست أني سو تي ناس أوي تزول لهم حسب النحوار المسترفة المستسوى وتم تداول نعمل أولادي ودا ودنا عين درنا نداول أي تقبل أبو زي يقول عاد عند زلا وهذا إذا كل متهدف حلو في حال زول نساء ودهم يمثل نساء دم قانع ودنا نجرنا نقول نتن حمشتش كريم كتش حزب صحاب نسوا تباهين نسوا هواو أمو بود زحلفون زلون ولد وكذا إذا كل نحرفتون أنت أب ساعتي جزء أكيد دوائر عشان بعد عمل سلسلة كذا توقيت دو ساعتي أب دقوائر إلى أميرة السبلة تحدى أمكو أبو زي يقولوا بين أسبوعين الله خير قال مزحت من ساعة زي كله فرتت غربة بارنت ندحلفوا لا أولاد سجى مقالي هو سجى فيدي أولاد يقولوا ما يساعد خمسة تاتوهم حركة إذا كاني أبسل عمل أو بعد عمل هو تخيلهم شو من أبدل أسألهم من زوال سيدي أبسل جاهز هذا أمن تاي والدول زي كل ما قلت لا أنا في براسي حلو حالي فوق وتعال هذا شجرهم زلوا أبصرهم زلوا متكامل كانوا وسيهم بزحات يوم بهذا الزلوا لذي هو ولا حاجة سووا حتى زلوا ليه كذا صار رحلة نسلا هالشيء سبيلات من عرينا يقوم سبيلات صنعوا حمد مع تعريف كان بيت مع تعريف كان كلهم أبزن أندرات شلاقات ندات دروي حسب نحوارون زطفوا وما كانوا ولا حد سبب حتى زي كلهم حد سبب فيهم المسلمين كانوا يسبب زي كم زي كانوا زي بحال كل عين سلطان زلهم هذا راح نزل بحال غيره التساسي زل هذا دورنا حدث هذا زي كم زلهم هذا زفوا تعميد سلادي زي كل نجار بديهم يوم نابزون يوم سجلتن برا تحفظ وزي بعين وتهدر في يقولوا بعين تمهارك انتي نحن نكون تمهارس بحال أبيت ملتي تمهيرهم منتي إذا ست أنا الذي زي حازم ويكان منتي درجات جيبوت كنودا تمهارهم لين سياسون نعم تملتي أمي جمرة نفسنا تسعة كوبي أخلنا كل ما سيء بدو تملتي زي رقابة نفس ملتي دعونا كن أبدي زي نسو كل شيء بيت ملتاتن ما مهرانين زنبرة وكل سنة زنبرة لازم تمهارس يوم بعيش أنا نفس ملتي بعد كم سنة وكذا أبدي نعيد ما في اللي زنبرة مثلا عبيدين كلها تمين بقولكن نفيهم بتعد منهم زي كونه بتعيش في الاستخيل بساعات مهارة بتعد تموتون كسارة قليل أدري زي زين يطلعش أو زوجهم وما كانوا ده تجارتين يتسا تجارتين صغيرين بيجي تام تجارتين يتسا تجارتين أبتم تقوم بقصة كده بتدرب تاكا أبدي غوري في زراعة يتجبر بتجارة سلازي هساونتي ده تجارتين زي ما كانوا نبضاتهم زي ما كانوا نبضاتهم دنا أصله بيجي استفسروا له itu bukan nanti akhir zaman su jenis dan itu hanya tu itu tambah hari dilihat naik mesti nyawa bahagi naik mesti nyawa itu memang abnadi sudah ada awal tu orang pun busuk bahagi zaman sudah nawa zaman busuk laut naik mesti terawih itu orang lagi itu mesti ada sebahan segala hamsai itu sudah nawa jadi audit mesti itu apa ada pun buku buku jadi syukur madrasah زي أبي حجزي نقول لك لو بدهم صورنا أو بزحة سبعة سمعوا بتدرين عن تايكم بدو أيضا اللي تنزلوا عن وادي وإذا قال زيزون أو بزحة سبعة سمعوا إذا كان إتي أمهارة أو أمبارده بوسات فيتو سلسلة جماعة أهم شيء اللي كان زبارة سلسلة جوي مهنياتو يدو أمبارده بعمقة بوسات فيهن سلسلة جلس إذا هي مواقع ليش لازم زوجل أمبارده أمبارده ليش كمان لك أولا كلام لبنان سيا خاصهم وين مهور خاصهم على تين حساب هيك لازم نقصر ما خلهم نايم مهارة بزي جماعة مسرحية مهنياتو تمام مهارة تمام دليل نورهم أو هاجرهم كفري لهم على سس نورهم ناقاتهم الهاجرة وبدي كباوكني بزي جماعة الصدر لكم من الواحدة إذا ما عملت الصدر وتم شعورنا في تمردون كأنه بزي جماعة يجي الحمص عنكم نعرف كثيرا فمسترحم كثير بس يجرون كأنه سبراز يكونس لتان الصوم كلام ما زلوا بيتمردي أو أنا أقوم جزء الصوم يشوفون عليه لازم مسحوا بعيدهم أدركانه ويشتى من على مسحات دول المدرك يعني أفتي من على الكول زنبارك زي إذا ما مهران زي أتم أبز زي أنت يكون مرجو ميلون فكيف ما كيف تقول جد مثال ما كلاس نتيم نحن نحن خمسة نكون هيرة أبز عليه أنتي مركون ذلك أسأل كذا وقولي دون المدرك إذا تمهاري إذا دون الوازن لو يكون تقول لي تقولين تماهيرك تقول كم زينه تماهاي تماهير أنت كم زفر زلوا إذا تقولين إذا نجد زي أبو سبب سوي سلزي إذا تمهاري بتمرت الشلل كله تقول تمرت تقول كم زينه واقع كم زينه كم مهار بقدر أنزل أنفذ كم زينه هنا أقول تعلم الإسبان تمهاري سلزي مثلا ولا هي تروح كم زلوا عبي حاول تروح زلوا سلزي إذا بحاجة تزي إثناء كم مرتبة إثناء كم مرتبة إذا تبغى وصل خير كبير بدحري كلام تاو ما تزبي كاشام من العلوم حدش وعزوري إذا كلام تاو ما تزبيلون لازم يمنسي كابودون عبي حاول مسافرة كابودون عبقى ديو كفلاس لدلو مهنياتو أفكر بحب زون الزخ على الدرجة ومسلسل إذا كل طار إذا لو أحسن على الزخ الجزية جواب تعافي سلازي أفتح ناس عمل وين تسوق زخون حدث وين تراس أمور زخون حدث سيجر جهود هذا حين بزيت زخون النجار ناس عمل وين عمل ذي وين كده ذي كله مهار سلازي لو يصفى وقرص إحنا ناخذ معه سلازي لو إذا كأني بسرعة يستفسر حولي ماله كأقل يعني كلام ده ما مالك اللي توري ليك أنت كفيلهم هان إيه تناقض إذا كفيلهم هان أي تخفى كان دقتي لازم سلوا ورا كخمية دينا نزت ما هاي كمية سلوا ورا تدي كذا ورا أساسا كذا دوال سحرة سلوا كمية إذا دارك إتي مسيجة كذا زدوا سناس كله بيت مكان كاب تينور بيت مكتوتي وأتينا لازم هارون نمر مدرب كل جزء خاني جنس أمور تفصل سمع النمرين كابتي كل جزء أبتمكن أبسط تدرين جلو خاني كام كزاور نمر جزء أبز جزء زي ما بدوهاتي كل حالته أساسا ورادما هذا تلقراف سوى هذا سالك أدواني تحتاج يكون أحتاج يكون كل أخذنا مثلا آخر بلا كل وري تقول لك بوع سلام مستهل فرمي كما هاي نحن نقول سامي كوي فشوفنا اللي عندنا كل مسؤول سواء فشوفنا اللي حسب ورد كلنا صالح إذا كانوا كانت تكون تدخل وليا كنت حابب عايز ورد يعني مقصد المسوار ولده قليل بدويه مسواري كابداتنا تمسح دليل جميل جاسوسات ميرون كنتين يكون هذا بعض داسون تشوي ولدي أبدا تسعات الوعي إذا عن عمشة كفور بعد كابتن استفاد عليه مثل كان قالوا تشوي تصور ولا الوعي الجزائي دي عشرة عمشة جفيفتين مسوار مثل صار زلون ولده قليل تسوي له إذا نقول نستمر زلون نسأل زلون نسأل بدويه يكون قال مثال تمام يونيفرسيتي تمام يونيفرسيتي كنا مثلا أفتي عبادة سامن أفتي منسين أنا ما كده خايف لما جمعنا مور كلهم يقولوا أب حد مور عشرة مرات حد أقول لك حايش لا تبغى تقول إذا يوم حنتي قوم يوم صار أنت ليدن أو دفع عن هذا كلهم إذا أنتم من حنتي قوم ناس لا تبغى هذا واحد سلامة الله أمور على هذا بالفعل نزيعهم نزيم الدوار نزيهم مسوات ناحية. إذا حسب السبب أصل سلسلة كاب حسب سب سرحتني أخذ الرأس لأنه في هذا بتيجي يمارسون كل شيء أكيد تشكل ثلاثة حسب الحوار والسلسلة بدريو يمارس مساعدة لما هذا يتوصل لذيله عسرت حدا من الزوجة سوا وسايني كله سوا في جمر على الجمهور وعسرت ساعات الزريعة أنا أسوا تري كلهم بتوم نتعلم يجوبات مو وكهرات أو نفس مسجد مو أبسط جزء كسر قويسو بعد زيوت زحلو في تمهار وكذا إذا كل حليفه كل هذا مهارة ما يأخذ مهارة كل على كان هذا مهارة أما وده لكن بلاد بيتواهل ما مريضهم بس ولا نحليفهم نتي استرف نتي خليفة أخذوا وقت نبي فعال ويانا بحياة هذا موجودهم طبعا يمكن أريد كم زين ولا يبغون حالات ويانا في إجازة من حد ثقة من حد ما بدك عن حليفة أنا دوا كان حلو خلاص على قومي أبي تيجي حالات زي كده وتوم حالات ثانية أسمع ما توم جلد ساعتين أي تعلم جلد بام أي تواصل بينهم أبي نتفاهم مثلاً يقول يوعد اتخاذ دربي ولا جت معسكرات الأمر بتمرتب وانا أيام هنا تقول بيجي بوارفيا بساعتين حلوة فوق مرزق الزواج لهذه إذا نعمل أبي سيلو فري وتقولوا أبي تبقى على وده تبعتي وسماعه وزيادة التنسيق أبي ستين بيت مرتي أبي بيت مرتي إذا سماعه ده كيسهم يعني يوم دنا كيسهم يوم دنا ما مسألة تسفل سلني بلو كما يروم تكون كان زي بلو من دلائل ما هي أقول كل بعين تعلم وتهدرنا أنت تحيزون كل عين ساعتي أول شيء تستحقين سلذي أبي بقى تسفل ورده سلذي وارتيا دلو أمرت سلذي بلو أبو كورس للسوال راح بيجون ويكاني أبو كورس اللي بيسمى الفوز اللي بيسمى الجول ماي إذا كل نجار ساعة على اللغة زي ما عندنا هنا بدحري وفر سدادي تحت زلنا يو أبزي دكة غير زبلنا دلو زلنا وفر سداد إذا كل ده سبحانه زوار لما نسي أما ودعتهم ترفز للقوانين أبي بعد حسايوها حد مع زنجور براس لازم خيزين كده أفضل ده خفضة بدحريو أميديا متيوم حد ميديا راح تسمع أنت حفاش ده زي كوي خالي أسمع زي في كل الزمن ما نسي أو أمتيوم يوم إتي سلسلة ناي سداد خبر وجمي أما يسرع تقول زي كل ما نسي وسأل كايزلو كره كايزلو ومي حاجة نداولو بخصوص جميلو يتمسرعون جندا وياني أمريكان جلاتولا بيجي جراها مرات سريعة من سياسنا تزقوا مالا يدوم يتمسمر بيجي كم زول حبيبه وتوهنا دين بعلم دوار دو خمس مرات نجس بحالتين كولرا تزكاية عبيد بروجكت زي عم سلطنه خمس مرات نجوميه كله بنزل وسائل هذون خمس مرات صوفلين نفس معسكرات لا السودان إثيوبيا نتفسحون أبدا نسخة تصنعون بوصها سخاتن سليتين وحدات أيضا كابجاتن كاني أدليت يوم صباحا سباتن مهار خمس زبون سباتن عندك شوي نماذج عندنا baru selesai dia masuk di kali, abdi pun amasa mahau lalu serat. Ada walau, anda pun nanti saya abdi kawan derani, jadi serat, jadi selesai ni, habis saya kamu kita selesai, kamu kawan serat selesai lo, kerap lagi. Jadi saya jika ni nak abdi lo ada dalam abdi lo hasil serat, maklum besar, kayu wanasmer, dan yang sebelum berada awal, zoom kali. Kali, jadi sama hari nanti saya, baik, zoom. أبسحين كما هذا إذا أبعد الإنسان أبسد أبرزه أمدين فتبرقاني بينها خفيف المال مشاور من ذاك أبغى أبحالنا نشوف الماء استفاد عليه بالكذب والجنزب ويجا أبجدهم أخابيتهم عليه إذا أبسداني يجيبان كم تقولون سبسينا زخيل مسمر سبلي زخيل مسمر غيره كامل كابنا بنشوف المصحابون أما وداكوا سبولاني كابنا سلابي وضم الحالة المنسيات ناي سينان ناي دبيان نحرقينايو زيوم عندهم منسيات أم زبانهم بيألفين بيحاولوا بلاستيكين عندهم تطبوا وربطهم من نقصهم زي تعدل الجنزة زحاتوا وفلور أمور داكوا كليتهم كي جرفه بشوتهم عليه إذا كان قبل بيعي أكنزي ندادر بيو أكنزي يبلا عقافة ندادر بيو زي تعدل الجنزة زحاتوا نفس فلاري سنسر تداشوا كل عينة فتاني عدد راح يكون أبسطهم بزح. وزعت بحال البنزين. أمور جاتا إذا كل حاجة أتنزع عندنا ينسى هذا ويتداول على الصحراء. يفهم أقل من ناس أكاي. كذب كلام سكون. كنتي كلام سنيهم. لكن مسكين عندنا أبو نفسي بس تذكرون نفسي بس ولا تزينتهم. ورقة أيوة وكل هذا وهذا جهاز ترحزوا أقل النظرات أوروبا إسرائيل قليلا إسرائيل ظلوا من الشعب أما ودادا نبوادا واندا بروزوس تتريزون فرنساني أم بلادي دم زود وكاب بزحك باز فيديو تجدي تكون بزحك يعني أبزعدي تأثيرهم زخونة ويكان زخونة نستجيب له جينا حمسات أربعة الأشهر بقول زي كتب المنسيات أصلنا تزوجوا هؤلاء رأي ولا حد زي بلهم بزحك كابزي أنسان مليار يوانا سيدو مليار بيسون نقال أي سيدة زمرو عاني بدعش تحاربوا قبلية كلها بنزل إذا كل حليفهم نبحر أجمعهم البحري كم سنة يزلنا بلاسيا يروم نبحر دمع على بصوم البحري تقعيون يعني سنة إستان ملسان وحد اللي استانه اللي راجل اليوم هنا أدلت أبي أترى غير حاجة جهود تحيزن اليوم أخيك أولاد المقاولين مستعرفوا كل مدرك شيشاي إذا أنت كلاس جات حيجي كي تلقين كافي تخبرين على سنة إذن أنا سيدنا زخون الإسراج الحالي تعاطينا عشرة عملات أو نص سنة صحيح هذا حيجي بتوم بسوم كبيرهم بسوم وكذا من السيارة لو أسمع بيسو تسير ويقول نتي زلوا وسع أبزبام يقولون من السيارة اليوم حيجي بقينا حمود زبها تسير هذا لذي هذا يعني نتولده
سيلا حنيك
أدي روسي عايز تستنى نسي زفر على اسم الدعوة وأنه كابو بزرع عليكم ونعرف كل نجار أبو بس يوم حسب النحوار وسوف بيجي بيجي أي سنة لو تفعل ومنسي كم زيد تسير وهذي مقالو زفر على اسم الدعوة كم نقول فيه أي مثلا دايرة زين سيزيد بزوجي وزوجنا بتوعه ويقعد خارج بتوعه بدهم كله قبلوا أحسن لنا نعمل شيء ويحبي أيانا كمودا سمايا لذين اللي حابيننا أبوهم أبو تقول لكل هذا الحالة من الجبل بزي بريء يغني زكاة التربية
Saya ditanya kalau ada dalam saya handle karena maybe hands betul presentation malati kab zoom call kab gazetanya kurang sih betul Shishay selalu sebalik ayo jalan akan betul betul itu kayak حد تطلع كذبت كأيها
شيشاي يعني بحكي زي زله كم زيركا أرينكا سنة في التقاوم بالجدي تدرنا سماع كعم تقول أنت تقولنا حتى مجلس حنت أسرنا كتعطوا زود سبعة زغل زعل بفعل زغل بعد نرجع سنة اسكي اشتري حضرين حضرنا زم صار يأكل منيهم يقول فوريوم على الجلاليوم كاريات وصل تاس اسكي تاس لام صندوق الفتاة وإذا فاندرا بوكس تبع المسكين فورو جلسنا من يوم مسكبر من يزندس أكتر حدا تتصل بيهم ويس كذا جروب فولو مالتهم يا استقبال صعب لا
سكيقول صعب بالكل حسنا بالكل ده سبلاني بزاح يسمع عبارة من نسبة معلش
أوكي كده قمنا كارنا عايز سمع عندها
شيء
أوكي انتايلو دكتور من سأل حتى كانت أنهم توم نزول له كفأتات تقوم لوسي بوجد اليوم شو ما لهم لو كاتيك ناس أنتي قطعة دوت الله ذلوا عطروسي بس كثر ناس أوش أستنتايلو من يقولون سباس بوجد لها اليوم من يقولون سبتي حدثي زحد ينتايلو
أوكي تعمسكوا بحبشة مودانا ليول كون أبزي نعمل زمزان ليول نعملهم أبزي زي زلات زي تجاوز بس كلام تاسر لهم بس كأني وتاجر هم يقولون ناس يصابون بالله سلندي كندي زوج نعملهم أبزي سدفينهم تجي إزاي ترى دارهم هم يبصري هجي هم يتسمعون كلهم أنت نقدر أنا أتذكر مني ولا بعدين كابتنسي تتريزين من بعد أصحاب الناس اللي يقولون شو أبى أتشهن بعدين أبى تاوتي أتشهن بعد الكاميرا ترانزيت كل صغلهم يعني بعد عملية نيرتها بيليس كابوس تدريب إذا كابتي سرعة زبون رزق من الوقت التي يزيد وحق أي كان يقابل الزبون رزق من الوقت أنا قاعد بداية نجيبنا كابوس سين نزار أوي عدد نجيبه أبزوي عن سوى السكول أو تأثيرنا بدريو ن نسوى كان يبتنا هنا نسوى كهوس نقوله أو أداوي لنا أبعد ويكون حد كلنا ممكن سيباتنا إن كلام سيباتنا هذه أتا أداوي تقول بالنسبة لنا جو بزود أنا إن ترى وتهدرات ديو إذا وتهدرات زيادة شو كلهم بتريا بيزم ديو نسمع نسي شو نسوي سوات كم نسوي مسكت هو بدي إذا ما في ناسي جت حقنا سيباتنا نفاسنا لنا أبعد وتهدرات زيادة سيباتنا يعني عند عبد الله خمسة بيوم فبحاول أو نورك بس أنا أطلبنا كأدارة شكلهم أنا أفتح شو بيجاتهم سلازي تتمنى شيء I don't know أنا أير دامين عادي بجمعية كلنا نقول ذات فهم شيء ثاني كلنا نقول ذات فهم أبي أترى هنا أنا اسمه حساب زيون كم سب أنا لكم نعم من حساب الدولة كل وحولات سبعة دوسهم تقوى يوم نزي جنب قايسي تلا علوم الأول إلى وي نابزنا جنب محمد زلو ونيا عسى ثلاث عاملات بسبيسو نابزنا درجات يا إذا دوسهم تقوى كانوا بقولوا نايك سرعة تبديهم أبتدي زيادة بك أيناتنا ليلو بصم الحاوي نعم نتحنتي كمان نتفرقون سي وفين تاني أب حاجة دي جمال لازم نقول له أتصور مستقبل ودسوا أيكو ميله يبني تتركون لا يدسوا شيء ترى هذا الناس كلهم زيادة تدعته الصغار من تجوا أنا هذا على زمن ما هو كذا هنا لازم يتم أغلب يوم أنت كلهم مستردوا ولا حد تشوفهم كم زي كلهم بصم أدين وتخرجوا وكذا زي كلهم كذا تزداد زحسن لازم مثلا أقول أرتدي حاجة قد زنبري لما ده حاجة قد يرجع نعمل له نعد مساكنون أتصور حتى زنبر كله بطلنا من ولا حاجة سد بقى بتركيهم هذا مسؤول نتابع المساحات ده بطلنا من التي نعم صعدوا جماعة صادق بطلنا من التقاني أول تأكلهم نسي أول سنة أبيهم هم علينا نير أنا هذا وقت سجاد في المنزل تفتحوا وروح حد الزبالة تريهم نامس ما يتكلمون سلازم يزوم من سيرجع كم يقول من سيرجع وسمعنا لونسا كل ما نسيلكم كوي من تاي تاني يتصوري فيه خلي إلى خلي زين غير كل مو لنا متسيتي أبي أنتاسي مسيني روشة شو عنده أبين عم يحاول ينحر لي فمي أفتح حالي تاكلنا أنا مسافر ينحر عبي أنت أنت ما كره ويسي عبي ولا حد نقدر كوي جيب لي أبي سينور زمان تنور زمان لو أفتح عسر زمارة زمان مسافر بيتا أنا أبي سيناتي نجزا من النتي كوي إلا أبو يزورني أو يزورني كم بيتسب موصل للقيم بتوم بيتسب لو رسول له وجاي بتعيدون ده أكو فريسة عليه سلازم إحنا سكولنا هنا قوم تاني أبي الناس قوم ندبرني أنا فروق ده جاي وأنا قوم زغلو أبو دريس سلازم سكول قوم تاني
Thank you.
كان عمي جمرة حضرة أو قبل تدل أسوأ جمرة نهاية مقام من جديد قبل مثلا.
Thank you. عملنا. نمو فعلا Shishay. Okay. بسم الله لكم. يقولهم حزم. I'm gonna have to just repeat. Wow. Speaking of the demo, I was going to say please silence your phones. Please silence your phones. And those of you in Zoom, please mute yourselves unless you're speaking. That's the rule. Our second presenter is going to be Helen Berhane. The title of her presentation is Witnessing Eritrea's Prison System as a Christian. Before I invite Helen to the stage, I'm going to read her bio. Helen Berhane is an Eritrean gospel singer and Bible teacher who was arrested in 2003, raided on a house where she was teaching young Christians. Beaten and imprisoned, she spent 32 months in a shipping container without adequate ventilation, light, sanitation, or food. While in prison, Helen was subjected to torture regularly, and severe and sustained assault by a prison guard in 2006 almost killed her and left her unable to walk. Helen was released in November 2006 and managed to escape to Sudan despite her ongoing disability. She was obliged to remain a low profile until eventually being granted asylum in Denmark, where she recovered from her injuries. Helen, I welcome you. The stage is yours, and thank you for your wonderful presentation that you're about to give. Please welcome Helen. Thank you, everyone. I hope, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you. Sitting for peace and democracy in Eritrea, thank you for inviting me. My presentation is about persecution, as you see on the slides. So I will speak about religious persecution in Eritrea. Religious persecution in Eritrea. If you put the next slide. This presentation explores the religious persecution that takes place in Eritrea and my personal experience as a Christian. So, religious persecution in Eritrea. Continue, please. Eritrea's government started to crack down in 2002. I need to correct this without any explanation. The government shut down all the churches and says recognized only for religious groups, but which is not true. They say Orthodox, Catholic, Evangelical, Lutheran, Sunni Islam. But all these groups still suffer. They are also targeted of persecution, with some facing imprisonment, torture, and even death. Because what they are saying and what they are doing is totally different. Even the Patriarch Abuna Antonius was in prison until they passed away. So if you continue about persecution about Jehovah's Witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses experience ongoing intense persecution in Eritrea since Eritrea became independent in 1993. The government has imprisoned, tortured, and harshed Jehovah's Witnesses, and many are still detained in harsh conditions. So, about the Muslim and Christian religious leaders' persecution, respected Eritrea Patriarch Abuna Antonius dies after 16 years in detained in February 2022. Also, respected Eritrean Muslim elder Mr. Musa Muhammad died while in detained in March 2018. So, persecution of Christians, the government has closed down many churches and imprisoned many Christians for practicing their faith. Several Christian leaders are imprisoned in harsh conditions since 2002. Some have been killed for refusing to renounce their faith, and several of them are still detained without trial, out law. I mean, indefinitely. So, if we see the condition of the religious persecution are subject to inhumane conditions. They are often held in underground cells, containers, and subject to torture. They are denied medical treatment and access to legal representation. My personal religious persecution experience as a Christian in Eritrea. By 2002, I was a member of Rhema Church, at that time the largest Pentecostal church in Asmara. In February 2004, while teaching a group of young people, the police arrived in the house and arrested us. But the worst thing in that time, most of the police was drunk. It's 2 a.m. in the night. They didn't know in which part even they beat you. So they beat us to the 6th division.
I think
So they beat us several before taking us to the police station.
yes, I think
The next day, we were taken to Agabi military prison,
I'll let him
and later
okay.
transport
we'll
to
share you
Mysore,
ceremony,
which means
co-hosting
container.
Okay, thank you.
So, living condition in the container is hell on the earth. Can you continue the other slide? The container was very sorry. Around 10 of us were imprisoned in a shipping container, which was dirty and full of lice. We received very little bad quality food. More and more Christians arrived in the container who had been arrested in riots. We were always tortured, and if you refuse to sign a paper abandoning your face, they did many terrible things to you. So, living condition in the container was very cold at night and very hot during the day. Actually, around 1 a.m., around 1 p.m., even you can't light the container. All of us in the middle, some teenagers, they start collapse on the floor. The atmosphere was suffocating and the floor was always wet. Non-Christians were also detained with us. The container was full of lice and they jumping around and beat us. Even there was maggots also. So it was hard to sleep. There was no toilet and we were only given one small bucket. So to share for the whole night. But the worst thing, the food is bad. If somebody has diarrhea, it smells awful. The container was full of lice and they jumping around and beat us, so it was hard to even to sleep. I think I repeat it. So about the punishment for refusing to abandon faith. If you refuse to sign a paper abandoning your faith, they did many terrible things to you. I continue to refuse and encourage other women to do so. And as a result, I was put in a container with
Okay,
a
that's
woman
fine.
who had
That's good.
a
Okay,
severe
good.
mental
Okay, thank you.
illness. This woman needed medication. She was desperate. The lady is sister-in-law of the later General Wuchu, President Afwerki, in her circle. She was violent, screaming and jumping around. They told us she had been in the United States for 23 years. I don't know for what reason she's in container, but I had to stay up protecting myself and was exhausted and frustrated. She pulled my hair. She jumped on the container. Imagine 24 hours with mental ill woman inside the container. It was the hardest because it's a psychological battle. This is a common punishment technique the government used to punish prisoners to be detained. So I was in prison with this lady for 10 months. It's easy to speak about it. It's hard to go through this. After 2 years, I was taken out of the container. They made me sit on the ground and ask where the Bible was that I was caught or in the letters when I sent 4 or 5 letters. I said I did not have one and that the words were in my head. They replied, okay, so we can destroy them. They began to beat me my head with their feet, hands, anything else they had. Other prisoners screaming at that time to stop because in that place, 23 metal shipping containers full of young people, 25, 24 young people. Even you don't have space to sleep. That was also the worst torture. So they eventually stopped and throw me back to the container. I had a terrible headache all night. The next morning, I was chained and taken to a room for more torture. They used this electrical police stick. So, the guard beat me countless times with all his might. Taking 5 minutes break to regain his strength, asked me over and over to renounce my faith. He targeted my hands and the fingers, saying, those are the ones doing this writing. My whole body was swallowed and shocked involuntarily. He was shouting as he beat me when I kept silent. He continued to torture me until he had no more sense. Then he sat down and said, Helen, what do you think? I told him, you did your job and done my job. We had been done well. He then called the guard and shouting, get her out of my sight. I was dizzy. My body had been beaten until it was deep red and blue. I was completely unable to walk. So they dragged me back to the container. They tried to handicap me, but my hand was too swollen to fit. My legs were badly damaged, and I only began to walk again after receiving treatment in my adult home, Denmark. I was in prison for 32 months in this shipping container in total. Today, I'm free. And when I see a shipping container, it is hard for me to imagine how I survived. However, because of my faith, my experience made me stronger. I am not afraid of anything now. I have been real handed. I have seen real hardship and my God was with me. So now, when life is easy, I'm not afraid to speak out on behalf of thousands of others who are still in the awful situation and cannot speak for themselves. Some church leaders have been detained for 18 years. In June, Sgowini Mokonnen Haile, the wife of one of 3 Orthodox priests, detained since 2004, without seeing her husband, leaving their 6 children alone. This is just one of many thousands of tragic stories. So now, my conclusion, if you go to conclusion, let us unite in calling, urging members of the international community to take forward the 2016 recommendation of the UN Commission of Inquiry, which highlight religious persecution and other crimes against humanity in Eritrea. Eritrea also at the root of the problem in Tigray genocide. And I also strongly request the government, every nation, to maintain scrutiny and increase pressure until every prisoner of conscience is free and there is justice for every victim, both Eritrea and Tigray. I believe change of government is needed in Eritrea to bring change and address this grave human rights violence. Thank you, everyone. What I want to say is we need to consistently do something for our people. Our people not deserve this.
Slide.
Constant is the critical driving for success.
She can say.
Consistency, I believe, will bring change. So I love you all. So we need to unite and work together so we can do more. Also, we need to trust each other. So if somebody have any question.
I thank you for showing Helen, and thank you for your testimony. Anyone? Just one question, because we have very little time for the rest of the presenters. We can take maybe one question. Anybody? Thank you, Helen. No questions for you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your testimony. Thank you so much. Thank you. Excuse me. I'm out of sorts right now. Okay. Thank you all for staying, and thank you all that are right now. This is going to be we're going to go to our third presenter, Mr. Felsi Symposium, and I'm going to include his bio before I invite him to take the stage. Felsi Symposium is a prolific, well-known, and popular intellectual who provides cogent and critical economic and political analysis of politics, history, and society of Horn of Africa. An avowed student of regional and national planning, Felsi has particularly written on the center versus territory issues, Afro-critical in HOA, Horn of Africa, and the origins of Somalia through federal arrangement and challenge in state governance in the 21st century. He is the member of one of the most respected websites, www.worldheronews.com. He also serves as a contributing editor for the academic journal entitled The Horn of Africa Journal. A regular participant of year-round ruminations of reflection on the Horn of Africa at the African Studies Association. Prior to that, he was a contributing editor to the Ethiopian Review. Faisal's publications include a book, Looking Backward and Looking Forward, The Ogaden Region in the 21st Century, 2011 edition. His articles include local and global norms, challenges to Somaliland and unilateral secession, Horn of Africa Journal, volume 28, I believe. That's the challenges, the culture of politics, the Somali experience, Horn of Africa Journal, volume 25, I want to say, but this is written in Latin again, so I will ask Faisal to clarify if I had it wrong. A challenge to the reconstruction of Somalia state from the unitary to federal policy. Faisal has also published over 50 essays and opinions. Faisal received his BA from Somalia National University in Lahore, Faculty of Education in 1939. MA in Afro-American Studies with emphasis on political science from UCLA. And second MA in Urban and Regional Development from UCLA. Currently, he is the CEO of the Office of Racial Justice, Equity and Transformation, Transformative Planning. He also serves as the Director of Research for the Institute for Horn of Africa Studies and Affairs, IHASA, based in the US. Faisal holds the title of Principal City Planner for the City of Los Angeles, where he is in charge of the Office of Policy Planning and Economic Development. Prior to that, he was in charge of the city's master planning and economic development division. Faisal is a award-winning policy planner and active member of both African Studies Association and American Planning Association, APA. Such a very, very rich profile. Thank you, Faisal, for being willing to present here, and I welcome you very warmly. Everyone, please help me welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I'm really delighted to be this forum. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And I don't know if you can see my slides, but
We can do that. Thank
okay.
you.
Okay, great. So my topic is how incomplete state formation in the whole of Africa is really the root cause of what we have.
Faisal, if possible,
really
can you use the presentation mode so that we can see?
The what? Slide?
Yeah, slideshow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so that's the topic I picked up, and this topic really raises the question of terminologies as to countries, states, nation states, and or nations, if you will. And a lot of people have different opinions about this terminology. So if I can just shed some light as to the role of these terminologies, they're really deep. Are these countries, nations, nation states, or in the case of Somalia, a nation in search of a nation state. Eritrea is a nation. Tigray Oromo is a nation state, actually. Tigray Oromia is a nation within a country. Somalis are, on the one hand, a nation state in Somalia per se, but at the same time, a nation in search of a nation state. And I think those words do have some meaning to the subject that I'll be talking, because the region, in my opinion, has not really completed its state formation, and that's the root cause of the problem. So, in one of our names, I think we got from the colonial history. I mean, the oldest name is Eritrea, which is Red Sea, which is given to us by European travelers. Basically, the purpose of Eritrea is the travel or the journey to the Red Sea. And also that same traveler talks about Ras Harfour in Somalia, which is all the way on the edge, and other Djibouti and actually Massawa, and to the south only Aksum area. The rest of the nations and countries that we'll be talking about came very late in the formation. And as you can see from this map, there was nothing called Somalia or Eritrea, or these are coastal communities. Now, today we have really this regions and countries that are ancient, that are tied by history, that are somehow geographically tied. This is not really an easy region. The whole of Africa can swallow. If you put Germany, France, and England together, it's that big. And by 2060, I think the whole of Africa probably will have larger population than those European countries, the major European countries. So in terms of numbers and geographic expressions, this is a very big region. This is a populous region as we grow. And of course, population is not created equal here. Ethiopia is always the behemoth that we are looking at. And that is a very serious issue I will quickly touch. Now, with the purpose of Eritrea, which the Europeans didn't know much about this area, comes the Crystal John, that mythical Christian Messiah that Europeans only know, even people in the region didn't know as much. And the reason why I'm mentioning the Crystal John is because it comes at the same time Europeans were fashioning the concept of nation and nation state. John Locke was talking about what a nation is, and Europeans were literally coming out of their area to kind of deal with the issue of nation. So Crystal John concept comes to the whole of Africa to really give a boost, if you will, of the version of nation state that they have in their minds. Ethiopia's coming into being as a protected state, if you will, by the Europeans who are really fashioning the entire globe, comes with that Crystal John. And I'm mentioning this because America's preeminent political scientist, Samuel Huntington, literally located the clashes of civilization in his book, in the Horn of Africa, and basically mentions Christians in the Horn and Muslims in the Horn as being the Achilles heels of when the civilization war takes place. And since that time, this region has been subjected to a massive manipulation, one power being supported by another, and the entire state formation has been subject to that era's concept. Now, forward moving, Menelik, in my opinion, is the beginning of that long history that in a way, enhances what we call the forced state formation. And the forced state formation has several characteristics. One, some powerful groups go to certain areas in any region, whether they come from Europe or from within, and Ethiopia and Darfur, which I will not deal because of the current situation that we have in Sudan. But both Ethiopia and Darfur are known to have used state formation to create what later on became native and settlers. Native and settlers don't only mean people who grab the land, and give to others who are coming to the area. The concept is also that some people in that region created have more rights than the others. The native always is not a citizen per se, and the state doesn't give them the priority of as a citizen, whereas the settler, and they can be. In Ethiopia, we usually associate the settler with one ethnic group, i.e. the Amhara. But settlers usually also bring with them technocrats from other groups. They bring slaves from other groups who are being free to fight for them. So definitely, Nile could be the top of that structure. But there were a lot of people from other regions who were either slaves or indentured slaves or hired warriors who were fighting for to create that concept of native and settler. And that concept really created the so-called whole of Africa's state structures. Throughout, whether you take in Eritrea, where it was under Ethiopia, whether you take Tigray, whether you take the Somali region, Oromo, everywhere that you go, the concept of some groups, if you will, citizens under that system had more rights than others. That settler native concept existed in South Africa, it existed even in America, where even we have a name according to Mahmoud Mamdani's latest book, Nativism and Settler is the creation of permanent minority, as he calls it, that you will always create a class that is native, like Native American Indians, that are second-class citizens, and that are quote unquote in the emergent political structure, permanent minority. And the concept of permanent minority is very dangerous because unless you fight, unless you rise up, some of the structures that exist within that native settler relationship can never free you. And that's why probably Eritrea is a little bit different today in the sense that it's not suffering from settler concept, but it has other issues. Now, that concept of settler native-based state formation moved to both Eritrean areas and Somali areas. It's really very interesting, the final phase of the so-called state formation of Ethiopia happens simultaneously in Eritrea and in the Ogaden, the Somali region, towards the end of 1954. This document, an agreement, quote unquote, agreement between Haile Selassie and the British Colonial Office at the time reached this so-called agreement to give Somaliland and Somali area, the largest Somali area, all the way to parts of the Redawa, to the emerging and returning Haile Selassie as a reward, as a prize, and then annexes that part to Ethiopia. 1955, as you guys also here know that, the debacle of the Eritrean political system came when Haile Selassie literally co-opted and abolished the so-called federal system that the two wanted to join. Of course, a large section of the Muslim Eritreans opposed that, whereas most of the Highlander Christians, to their dismay today, really sided with Haile Selassie's cause. Whether they were manipulated or not, we don't know. And I see the same trend and mistake repeated by some sectors of Eritreans in today's involvement of Ethiopian politics. In the 1990s, I used to write for the Ethiopian Review. The name Shabia among the right-wing Ethiopians were the most hated name, the most hated name. You could not go to an Ethiopian restaurant and say Eritrea. People will trash you. And today, as some of you or many of Eritreans fall in love with Ethiopia, I hope they are not repeating the same mistake they did repeat in 1955. That's my littlest, hit on you guys, if you don't mind. So the final phase of the forced Eritrean Somali annexation, or if you will, amalgamate to Ethiopia, forms that forced state formation. Now, state formation has several other characteristics. One of its biggest characteristics is people fight, as I said earlier. People fight to the tooth and nail until they find a solution. the creation of ELF, EPLF, Western Somali Liberation Front, TPLF, OLF, OLA, Sidama Liberation Front, Afar Liberation Front, Gambela People's Liberation Front, Agaw, and Amhara Popular Front today. It's not people going to party. People would have liked not to form this, but because of that concept of settler native, unequal citizenship, and a so-called state, always forces people to go to the war scenario. And that is one of the characteristics of forced state formation and incomplete state formation. If the state is complete and people are satisfied with the form of state that they have, then they go into other modes of participation, the ones that you have in some Western countries, where people still have questions and disagree with the sitting government, but they have a way to address. My sister was talking about religious persecution in Eritrea. If there were venues to take President Isaias to court as to the allegations made against him, then some of the people who are picking arms against him will not be taking place. And that goes across the board. If the Ethiopian government was giving people equal justice and equal citizenship, maybe you would not see OLA or Western Somali Liberation Front or Sidama Liberation Front. So that's one of the characteristics. Incomplete state formation. And Ethiopia is not a complete state formation. Eritrea is not in itself a complete state formation. And very soon you will see a lot of other issues emerging, challenging that concept. Now, the incomplete state formation in the Horn of Africa gave us very dismal conditions. For the last 40, 50, 60 years, we haven't progressed. If you look at all the indexes that measure human advancement, all of them are at the lowest out of 180 countries. Ethiopia is 175th, Eritrea is 176th, Djibouti is 172, and Somalia as one was not even assessed because by the time this data was collected, it didn't have enough data. Even today, 2023, that index or those indices stay the same. So basically, state formation that is incomplete begets you war and conflict, begets you harassment and torture, begets you diaspora and exodus. In the case of Eritrea, massive exodus, and therefore human advancement is retarded. Now, looking into the future by 2040, the Horn of Africa will come to have the population of 195 million people, close to 200. And the blue area, 164 million, is Ethiopia. That is very concerning. That is very concerning because you have a region that is very stable, that is dogs eating dogs, as we have seen in the last 50 years. And when you have this behemoth sitting in the middle that does not observe any rules, that has not observed any rules in the past, nor will show, nor will give us today the commitment to play by international rules, it's very frightening. What would this do to the region? I think I'll touch briefly. With that background, there are problems and scenarios that we can say. The ongoing potential military and political articulation in the region will continue for a while. We will see wars, you will see conflicts. We just finished one war. That's the Tigray War, consuming over 1 million people. Eritrea was involved deep in that dirt. So it was, although it's a different country than Ethiopia, but it was the major player in that war. So that potential military political problem does not absorb Eritrea or Ethiopia or even Somalia. Although there were allegations about Somalia getting involved, we have not seen hard data yet, but the plan was to involve Somalia, at least as far as I know. Also, The problem of the future of the region lies in Ethiopia's insatiable appetite and need for a potential sea outlet. John Spencer talked about this way back in his, Ethiopia at Bay. Will Ethiopia go for what it calls Afar and Assam outlet? Will it go for Zayla, which is Somalia, or Djibouti? And all those are in the minds of Ethiopia. It may lay dormant. People may not speak, openly, but as I said, in the 1990s, when I used to write the Ethiopian Review, the rallying issue was not Tigray among Ethiopians. The rallying issue was Assab is an Afar land. Therefore, it has to return to its home. Those issues are not going away because two guys drink coffee together. They are there. Unless you address them, they will not go. Mistrust between Ethiopia and Somalia is an ever-growing issue because of Abiy's recent, purchase of ships and also rebuilding his navy. Is he targeting at Eritrea, Djibouti, or Somalia? And the biggest fear is if Ethiopia weaponizes its 165 million people by 2040, when the others are paltry in terms of population. Ethiopia already weaponized the population. In the war of Tigray, Abiy created what we call waves, human waves, so that even if you are not militarily there, you can wipe out the enemy by sheer military. This has not started now. Between the war of Somalia and Ethiopia in 1977, the human wave was used. Peasants who were less trained were let go to the field to fight Somalis. And at one point, I recall Somalia had hundreds and thousands of prisoners, just like we have seen in the case of Tigray, and they couldn't do anything but to give them to the international community. And that human wave and that massive Ethiopian population, no matter whether Abiy and Isaias are friends today, will always put Eritrea on the edge of militaristic state. Unless we address the big picture of the region's state formation and good governance, Eritrea will always be forced. I don't care who comes. I don't, really subscribe to the fact that good relationship between Abiy and Isaias will grow. No, Ethiopia's human population capacity and its lack of good public policy towards its neighbors will always put these countries on the cusp of that weaponized human population and large population. And that will give people like Isaias or others to even be militaristic and autocratic. Now, the region, because of the fact that we never had a complete state and it's a dog fight in the region, we have variations of personal rule in the region, and that's the only game, with the exception of Somalia now. Since the civil war, there is no single person who is strong enough to keep the chair of presidency in Somalia. As you know, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who is now sitting there, has been re-elected for the second time. Prior to that, he was a president. But other than that, you have Ethiopia under the spell of what political scientists call typical autocratic ruler, who runs everything at his will. Eritrea has a very strong tyrant managing, as Yosef Gabriel yesterday said, and my sister repeated this morning, the largest open-air prison. That's really a very serious concept. The international world hasn't paid attention to this form of imprisoning the young people in Eritrea and the citizens, but it is an international phenomenon that we have not seen in many cases. And then Djibouti has that benevolent rule who is always in the background. Now, as I conclude, I like to look at a couple of issues with diplomacy and what have you. So if I can read just my concluding remarks. Yes. could Ethiopia, and I will just raise the question, could Ethiopia, with its massive population and military might as it brags, dictate the politics of the region? As Abiy wanted that, but so far it has not happened. As it did in the case of Tigray and the Tigray war, what is the likelihood that Ethiopia once again weaponize its population size to get access to the warm waters of the Eritrean Red Sea or thus in Somali territory? Again, question. Or would Ethiopia use the IGAD grouping to which Eritrea was absent for a long time as its tool to reach favorable terms of trade for a sea outlet that it needs in the region? Established in 1983, IGAD was simply for a simple cause of fighting environmental issues and drought. Today, it became a political tool for Ethiopia. And lastly, I will just raise the question of really what's the role of the superpowers? In the past, we haven't had good history when it comes to Western power rivalry. Today, there is a sort of rivalry in the area between the superpowers. Since most of us are diaspora in the West, particularly in the US, I really want to raise the question of what's the US's role in the region's, moving forward, and particularly in making sure that there is a way to engage its citizens in the diaspora to find solutions for tyrants, autocratic rulers, and even, benevolent dictators. If the West cannot do or help us do anything about those issues, particularly dealing with personal rule, there's nothing that they can do, even if they pump money and aid to the region. And with that, thank you very much. I appreciate
Presentation. I will invite people. I already see hands. People have questions for you, and thanks for finishing your presentation on time as well. So I will give the first question to Dr. Branda and Dr. Mensa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faisal. We appreciate very nice presentation. My question is based on your presentation. You have clearly, presented the problems that could possibly arise in the coming years from the massive population and the urbanization of Ethiopia. And you suggested that there should be some kind of solution. What would be that solution? You haven't presented possible solutions to avoid all these problems and calamities that might come in the coming years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a believer that most of the Horn of Africa's problems emanated from the Ethiopian state. If you go back, Menelik, Haile Selassie, destroying the federal system, the Eritrea or the Somali or the Oromo issue. There has to be a reformulation of the Ethiopian and regional, other states. I think if Ethiopia becomes a peaceful home for the 120 million, and some sort of reformulation of that is, Eritrea is suffering from internal issues, but the Ethiopian issues also impact. Somalia has internal issues, but the Ethiopian issues impact. So if we can reform Ethiopia, either make it confederation type so that no one group or political entity within that 120 million can declare war. So for instance, if Abiy is part of Oromia and he wants to go to war with Eritrea, Tigray and Somali and Amara could say no, and vice versa. I think the problem lies in Ethiopia's state. Unless we reform Ethiopia, the region will not see two things that are very important, actually three things that are very important. It will not see peace, no matter how. Today it could be between Eritrea and Ethiopia's friends, tomorrow it will shift to Somalia and Eritrea were imposing for a long time. I met all the leaders of Eritrea in Mogadishu, whether it is in Ramadan or Salah Sabi in his later years. But today, Asmara and Addis Ababa are in love with each other. all that is just a short-term calculation. We need to reform Ethiopia's state, and then once we reform Ethiopian state, we can reform the internal democratic governance issue or representative democracy, as Dr. Barakat Selassie calls it. Unless we do anything about Ethiopia, we cannot. We cannot have also economic growth, and we cannot have good governance as long as, say, Eritrea. As long as Eritrea is afraid of the 120 million Ethiopia and watching, today it may use tactical to leave the bill. But tomorrow, when that breaks, Eritrea will take its human resources, its capital, its everything to fend up from Ethiopia. So Tigray might not be an issue. So I think we need to reform the Ethiopian state. We need the West to understand that Ethiopia needs reform. Therefore, the other region states will also be reformed. I hope I did.
Next question from Dr. Mukhtar.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. But let me take it back, 1935, when the Ethiopians were occupied by the Italians. Then the Italians attempted to establish Italian Oriental Empire in East Africa. That's in the Horn of Africa. It includes Somalia, Eritrea, and of course Ethiopia. And they tried also to establish confederal states in the Horn of Africa. Now, my question to you is, you say that the Ethiopian imperial state building is still continuous, it's incomplete, absolutely, I agree with you. Now, let me take it back. How about if the Italian colonial rule in Ethiopia continued for another 20 years? What could happen? What could be the 2020 hindsight? What could be created? Or how can the landscape of the Horn of Africa could be changed?
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. I think they wanted to build that, but still, it could have been a state formed for us by an outsider that could not have understood how we relate to each other. It could have changed the result. For instance, they have on the books Oromia state, and people like I think the people who worked on that still lived until recently. They wanted the Greater Somalia to be on one side. So it could have had some consequences, and I think it may or may not have been bad. And I tell you one thing, there are 3 or 4 major linguistic groups at this point in time. And I'm not saying that's the formula to go by. You have the Tigrinya speaking linguistic group who are related to each other. Take elements out, Abiy, Mallas, these people out of the same. But in terms of cultural context, these are related to each other, if not the same people. Somalis are related in context. Oromia is a huge behemoth in its own right that sits in the middle of Ethiopia. And the Amharic speaking people are there. Maybe that is one big formula that may even do away with Ethiopia's headache now, which is what some groups call this, kill thing that they have not managed. I think all I'm saying is not Italy, not British or anybody, but we in the Horn of Africa need to sit down and design what kind of state formation work for us for the coming generation. I grew up in a war. My dad, 1950s, was in prison for the war for the Somalia uprising. And we still continue. And you guys are probably the children of the warriors of the longest war in human history for liberation, period, continuous war. So we need to sit down. It could have had some impact, but I think it's time that we sit down around the table and design a sustainable state formation that can work for us.
Thank you. Well, it looks like your presentation has sparked more questions, but we have limited time. I will apologize to my brother Fitaha. He has raised his hand. He's on Zoom. I really apologize that we can't take his question. But I also have more questions, and I am hoping that we can take this discussion maybe somewhere on Twitter or somewhere when we have time, when we're not like limited by time. So my brother, I apologize for not taking your question, and Mr. Faisal, your presentation was amazing. Thank you very much. So, well, yeah, my main question was, which I don't expect to be answered. He said the main problem with Ethiopia, how about Eritrea? It's destabilizing the whole region. You said that the problem with Eritrea is internal. I don't really think at this point that Eritrean problem is an internal problem. We're going everywhere with each other. So this will be a discussion for another day.
I think I say also.
Go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you.
No, I said also this militaristic mindset that you have in Eritrea at this current is mainly a reactive kind to, I'm not talking about the other internal issues, but this, I mean, you have 4 million people where almost 2 million are in the army. And why? He needs only 50,000 to suppress his people around. But it's 200, yeah, so thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I use the power of being the moderator to finish my question. So I apologize. I think I earned it. Okay, thank you all. Thank you for your patience with me. The next presenter is going to be Dr. Tedros Emmanuel. His piece is on mental health in shattered society. I will read Dr. Tedros Emmanuel's bio before I invite him to say, although you can see him already, he's been finished. So, but I will still read your bio before we start the presentation. Dr. Tedros Emmanuel, MD, has worked as a physician and GP in Sweden for the last 35 years. He studied medicine in Uppsala University, Sweden, and thereafter completed his specialization in general medicine. He has worked in different capacities as a physician, amongst others, in the CEO of Marsta Nervar. I hope I'm reading it correctly because this is in Swedish, a primary health center in the region of Stockholm, teacher of medical students and examiner of the specialist in general practice / family medicine under the auspices of Swedish Association of General Practice and Swedish Society of Medicine. He holds even a bachelor degree in political science. And the Swedish Society of Medicine. He holds a bachelor degree in political science and development studies and a diploma in medicine in low-income countries, both from Uppsala University. He is now the owner and director of Uppsala International Health Consultants AP in Uppsala, Sweden. He is married and a father of 3 adult children. Congratulations. He has written several books in Tigrinya on depression and anxiety, questions and answers for patients and relatives in 2021, disclosures on the issue of guilt, blame and responsibility, accountability and reconciliation, 2022. His first poetry book due to be published in fall of 2023. Good luck. And without further ado, now you may start your presentation. Thank you. Please welcome Dr. Tedros.
Thank you for the bio and hello everybody. Shall I share my slide? How do you want me to do that? You want me to put me as a co-signer?
You can share. Yes, you have the access to this.
All right. Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Can you make your screen full or slideshow, sorry?
Shall we start?
Yes.
You hear me? I see my presentation.
We can hear you, yes. You may.
All right, shall we start then?
Please, thank you.
All right, my subject is on the mental health in a shattered totalitarian society. I will be talking about the impact of war, internal violence, and repression on mental and psychological health of the Eritrean population, in particular those who were born 30 years before and 30 years after the independence of Eritrea in 1992. I agree with a lot with Faisal said, and when you talk about the mental health, you have also to take into account some of this intergenerational war and trauma. I just to put a cut off of about 150 years, that's about 6 generations. And I came actually to the war between Abzega and Herzega in 1871. That's between the Gyat Haidu and the late Rasmun the Kied. And what's special about this war was that the winners, they burned the whole village of Abzega and a number of the villages around. Some of my great-parents were involved. I know the trauma still lives in the family. And then there were a number of other wars inside Eritrea. These are major wars. And Gabriel Gombul has made this kind of presentation also. You have the war in Gunda 1875 and the Burak in 1879 against the Egyptians. You had the big war in Dogali against the Italians by Ras Alula. And then the Italians start coming and they start have wars in Agadez and Kassala in 1934, 35. All those who do these wars, they are Eritrean. And then you have this big battle of Adwa in 1996, where the peasant army wiped off all the Italian modern forces, but left for reasons only known to Menelik, accepted Italian sovereignty in Eritrea. And even here, the cruelty was very high because of those captured Eritreans who were considered as the traitors. About 1,000 of them, 800 of them, they cut their right hand and the left foot. And this is done without anesthesia. You can imagine the kind of trauma that this creates in a society. From 1912 to 31, the Italians were more concerned in the other war against the Turkish in Libya and Somalia, and they had recruited about 180,000 Eritrean askaris. And this is a huge number in a society then was about 1 million in its population. And then a few years later, about 5, 6 years, the second Italian invasion of Abyssinia started. There was about 200,000 askaris involved. This is the time where my own father was also involved in this kind of wars. And the amount of people who died in these wars is up to 500,000. And then you have when the Italians were losing after the Second World War, because this party got that 1940-41, and of course the big liberation war from 1961 to 1991. Nobody knows exactly how many people have died, but we assume some 70,000-80,000, and this including in the fratricidal war between Jaffa and Shabia that still haunts much of Eritrean politics. After that, independence came the big war between Eritrea and Ethiopia in 1998, 2000. And of course, the amount of people who died here, nobody knows. And the people are also deported from Ethiopia. There's a lot of drama in the society, and now we have the latest invasion of Tigray. So 6 generations, about 150 years, and every generation, my generation, have been involved in 3 wars. So every generation is involved. There is intergenerational transmission of post-traumatic stress disorder from parents to offspring, as suggests many literature. We know from the survivors of the Holocaust, trauma has effects across the generations. We know from studies among the US veterans that PTSD goes over to many of their children. We have also studies from refugee camps in many African countries. And this, the pathway is either directly for the child. Many of you here are involved in the Liberation War. I know I see Ababa here, so and there are also other ways of transmitting through the mother to the child. So there's a lot of trauma, and we have been talking about this for the last few days now. The intergenerational effect of war. We have been discussing the last speaker also speaks about the effects of war, the damage done to the social fabric of the society is enormous, the displacement of the population, which Joseph and Ngambul talked about. 1% of the Christian population is the diaspora. You know about the depletion and contamination of national resources. From afar are talking about it. We have been talking about this fostering a culture of violence, where the politics of hate and fear have become the dominant. And this has an effect on the way we see each other, because often we see our interests as mutually exclusive, and that's probably one of the reasons we continue to go to war, and this means a lot of the distribution of the resource to war and the destruction of the infrastructures that we have seen. In Tigray recently, they have all kinds of effect on the mental health of the population, the violence, the nutrition, and the infectious diseases that again rise after a period of decline. Of course, the population factor can play in our role, but Ethiopia was 25 million in the 70s. Now we're talking about 125 million. There is no development in the world that can contain this kind of growth. People talk about the democratic path, but it's not for this lecture. And as you all know, the major those who start war, those who pay to be the men, on those who suffer most of women and children. Now, traumatic stress is also associated with increased cortisol, not responses. These are flight responses. From my book, what you see is a synaptic cliff where the neurotransmitters here has an effect. What is important to know is that this is not just a psychological change. There is a lasting change in the brain. This kind of trauma has an impact on our brain. It's not just we feel something, it changes the way we see things, and the impact of is basically in this part of the brain, in the amygdala, hippocampus, and the frontal cortex. I would not want to go too much into medicine. Here you see a positron emission tomography of a person who has PTSD and a person who doesn't have PTSD. So there is a change in the brain, a physiological change in the brain. Now, no independent scientific studies have been conducted with detail, the reasons. But there is one study which is written by Dr. Felsi and Hazion, Mental Health in Eritrea, this review and also steps forward. In that, according to him, according to a 2014 local mental health Eritrea has a common mental disorder prevalence of about 14.5%. That's if you have a population of 3.5 million, that's about 500,000 people. It's a lot of people. And according to this is official published in Eritrea, they say in 2015, about 220,000 people, cases of depression were diagnosed, as well as about 160,000 of anxiety disorder. This is, of course, slightly higher than what the WHO studies showing other countries in other areas, but there were no statistics on the PTSD. Just to give you a slight glimpse, there is only one mental hospital. It's called the House of the Crazy, with 160 beds. And until now, the only way they restrain patients has been to change their beds by their uncles. The dominant diagnoses are, of course, schizophrenia, adult personality disorders, and affective disorder. The hospital has half of its 160 beds to civilians, and the other half are reserved for the military. And of all the healthcare expenditure by the government, 5% are directed towards the mental health. And of all the expenditures spent on the mental health, 93% is directed towards one hospital. That's 7% or 5% for the rest. There were the number of psychiatrists in Eritrea in 2020, this is according to the WHO report, is 2. No mental health. The number of mental health nurses about 50. In 2014, there was only one psychiatrist. His name is Dr. He was also an ordained Orthodox priest. He was in jail in 2004 and received languishing in jail. This is the person who Dr. Professor Bahani yesterday, when he mentioned him before, he must have tears in his eyes. He hasn't been accused in a court of law. Now, there are many studies that show studies conducted in other countries that show victims of war, both combatants and civilians, all experience a range of psychological effects, symptoms, and illnesses, including post-traumatic stress, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. We can, of course, do studies, but there are 1 million Eritreans abroad, but our focus has been, over political. Now, if we go to the few studies that are from Eritrea, there is one in words way contextualizing trauma experience and psychosocial well-being among Eritreans. This was published in 2003, 2004 by A.C. Thurwell. I'll come back to it. And there is also another study, mental health among Eritrean refugees at arrival and 1 year post-registration in Switzerland by Alphonse Cherner and Martin. If we go to this Thurwell study, I will not go into detail, so it takes so much time. It starts to examine what are my experience like with Christian youth, their psychosocial symptoms, and contextual factors related to psychosocial well-being in the cultural environment. They were more concerned about trauma and economic hardship or significant predictable for psychological stress. When people do not have the food to eat, they are concerned more about that. There was grief over their loss of parents. This was immediately after the last war in Ethiopia. There was grief over the loss of parents, because they were not resolved. They didn't know exactly, like today, people live in limbo, and that creates a lot of anxiety and stress. They were more positive about the future, but this is in 2004, 2005. Now, if we go to this study in Switzerland, mental health and resilience among Eritrean refugees, they had at the baseline and the start about 170 refugees, 40% 12 of them were female, that's 11, and the middle age of them was 25, which is about age you can expect in a time population today. And in this study, about 48.6 screened positive to PTSD. We're not going to be met something to that. About 10.3% screened positive to anxiety, 15% screened positive to depression, about 17.8 for these for hazardous drink and drinking too much alcohol. 1 year later, the 48 of them were left in the follow-up studies. That means they are in dropout of 55%. It's a little difficult to know who the dropouts were, those who were better or those who were worse. But the result shows that 38% reported imprisonment into transit countries, in jails. 58, almost 60% have witnessed the death of a close person along with migration. So they know, everybody knows somebody has very close to them has died in their way to migration. The hazardous risk for the use of alcohol has changed about 20%, but the rate of PTSD was a little lower from the baseline, and now it was 25%. Probably it can be those who have been better or worse who didn't come, and anxiety was marginally different. There were also other studies from Israel, the impact of trauma, the fight and protective treatment of mental health of the Israeli refugees living in Israel. And this was done among 34 Eritrean refugees, the age of 26 and 40. Here, the PTSD report was 50%, and it is consistent with finding in Switzerland and with finding in other countries. What was interesting in the Israeli study was that concealment strategies, silence in particular, the victims of rape and forgetting are often regarded as the culturally appropriate means of dealing with trauma and distress in other words. People felt it's better to forgive and forget if you can't do anything about it as archives. There's a lot of stigma with mental health about it. People are afraid to be called saloon, crazy, which is the word often used for a mental state. And what's also interesting in the Israeli study was that about 1/3 of them, 33%, saw spiritual and supernatural causes to their mental illness, and they believe both that the evil eye and the good are part of the cause. Now, there are also two different studies which are very interesting, and from Ethiopia, and this is about suicide attempts among adult Eritreans in Tigray, Ethiopia. The prevalence, this was done by a very governmental associated. It was done in Makaini from February to April 2020. We had 400 participants, to the bigger than the other, and the most interesting is that prevalence of suicide attempts to suicide was 7.3%, and that's very high. And another study, more or less by the same group, but with the involvement of a person called Todd Watts, shows study the prevalence and factor associated with suicide ideation, which is the suicide, so active suicide thought, and it was done in September to May to September 2020, the prevalence of suicide ideation. The source was about 20.5%. Therefore, prevalence that would be 4% in the US, all of you want to know. And the current symptoms of trauma, PTSD, a family history of mental illness, and hopelessness were the factors statistically associated with suicide attempts. And to summarize a little, all these four studies, one was on the Eritrean case, inside Eritrea was 98. Switzerland had 107 patients. The Israeli study had 34, and Mahani had 400 plus 400. So it's a little, they are a little too late, small to say these are statistically significant. Some of them are qualitative and not quantitative studies, but they give good indication on the subject. And my study was didn't have any translations because most of the translation can be a little more problematic. And there is also a little of my own study with this is a therapy group of 7 individuals, 4 men and 3 women, aged 30 to 31. And here we talked intensively about the trauma they have experienced, the physical trauma, the beating, the kicking, the wounds, the handicapping, all of this that we described we talked a little about sexual abuse, but more directly, and summary executions. What surprised me most is most of them think this is the normal trauma. They say this is normal. Have you been beaten? Have you been kicked? Yes, everybody has that. So it's a strange situation where one have a normal. These are some of the torture methods that are described by them. Actually, this is done by an Eritrean refugee now in Sweden. He was deported from Egypt to Eritrea and had to go to the jails again, as Joseph was talking about, and then has to flee again. And this is a picture he has done to the Commission of Human Rights. And I think this is what they call the helicopter, and this is what they call the ambulance, and this is the auto, or one of them. And this is where they are defecating, surrounded by men with guns. And strangely, those who torture the Eritreans are not are other Eritreans. And it requires a lot of understanding to see why do they do that. And the same, we talked about mental torture, and here the accusations, the abductions, the threats, and the interrogation in the Habitat. So they also think this is a normal phenomenon. We took up issues of social trauma, and in this they spoke as normal, the destruction of property and livestock, fleeing witnesses, displacement, migration, community and family breakups. This is what we are seeing this is what happened in Eritrea, not only now, even during the areas where present houses were destroyed if the children wouldn't join the front. And this is a picture says, one picture says more than 1,000 words. We have the young girl's picture from the internet of a house in Hadaya by the government of Eritrea for no apparent reason, except that they didn't have the proper reason. Now you have another, there's also a non-ecological trauma, destruction of infrastructure, destruction of policy. We have not seen this in the wars against Tigray, and this has been happening in Eritrea for 20 years. And the burning of farms, the destruction of crops has an enormous impact on the psychology and of the people. Let me summarize a little of what I'm saying. From my group, most of these young most of them, their formative years were spent in boot camps in Sawa, in refugee camps, and they have also had several distressing experiences in their way to Europe and the West. their belief in other support is very often low. And you can understand they grow up without a reference. They see the EPLF regime as the main source of their misery, and most of them they do not see a difference between EPLF and PLF. There are no categorization. They do not see, do not have a time categorization either before 2001. For them, they are the same. They are the same reason as well. They are misery. Their view of life. So shockingly very pessimistic. We have seen several of these studies. The PTSD rate is about 40 to 50. The depression rate is about 15. This is much higher than a normal society. The anxiety rate is 10%. The hazardous consumption levels are about 20%. Suicide attempt rate is higher, about 7%. Suicide ideation, suicide thought, 20%. We have seen homicide against spouses and girlfriends is frequent. I do not have statistics about this. And the rate of domestic violence is very high. You see it in the court house, at least in where I live in Sweden. And we have also seen random homicide of unknown people continue to exist. Some of them are you just kill people in a Kaya office or somewhere else. This has happened in certain European countries. Concealment strategies, we have already mentioned it. Forgetting is often regarded as the appropriate means of dealing, because some of the traumas, in particularly the victims of rape, is very, very difficult. And because we do not have any mechanism to cope with it, then perhaps that's the way people cope. And there is high level of belief that mental health is caused by supernatural Satan and things like that. And even in anxiety, because of these attitudes, they hardly get any medical attention. And this is, of course, of urgent concern. And we should also do some research and not only spend our time in politics. Let me give you some pictures of, this is a sad picture. I have to think twice if I'm going to share it with you, but this is a picture from The Guardian for Eritrean asylum seekers who kill themselves within 6 months. Look at their face. It's like we are children, we are the grandchildren. Let's release us. And let's go to the main cause of this probably striking to say on the mental health of this working. Yes, of course, from what he does, but I've talked with some former colleagues and some very close family members to him who have described certain of these characteristic traits. Some of the close family that who live in the same compound owned by his grandmother described a very dysfunctional family with heredity or mental disorder among siblings and cousins. And of course, depression and anxiety are something not even among leaders unknown. Now, those who know Israel Sapori, everybody about him. The first thing he says is about his vindictiveness. Very vindictive. People say about his insatiable need for admiration and attention, self-centered personality, who obviously blames everyone except himself. Even on his own interview. In Eritrea TV, they say he knows all in German or in Swedish, say, Besserwisser, he's all paternalistic, paternalizing, without trust of fund for his corporate acting. We are seeing the Al Jazeera and the BBC interviews. He has more sympathy and empathy, indifferent to the feeling of victims and their families. Some of the children of his own protege are up to this. Nishan should call the 16-year can keep him in jail without any reason. This is a very cruel regime. They say he's very impulsive, quick in decision making, and very unpredictable. This is one of the reasons the G15 were very critical of him, I think, in the former war against Ethiopia. He has contempt for anyone under him. He refers to his male colleagues in a female G, often with the bureaucracy nicknames. His mistrust of others, they also talk about, which means he's very dislikable, he's unpredictable age. He wants to dominate and control others regardless of the situation. And this is where he was forced to retain power. He's a powerless man. No concept. So the only source of power is force. They say he's very aloof from others, often isolated, perhaps even lonely, and often hangs out and links with the juniors and his bodyguards. So two persons, one time charming and witty, and another time cruel and cold, and of course, excessive consumption of alcohol, which is described by many, and perhaps if we want to speculate, as the doctor probably say here, narcissistic personality disorder with clear psychopathic traits, and he lives in an academy world cunning, forced to gain power at any cost. For those of you who want to another type of personality characterization, which is the widely used Briggs and Myers personality type, you may say more at the ISTP, introvert, sensitive, thinking, receiving personality type, passes test 13, and probably the near second is the introvert, sensitive, thinking, and judging. My own account is a very depressive and the person full of anxiety. And of course, after 50, 60 years of war, we have PTSD and he uses excessive alcohol, self-medication. Now to some of my conclusions, we need, of course, to break from this cycle of violence and retire from the path of destruction. This is the way. And of course, we in the diaspora, in particular, those paths who live in principles and democratic countries, have the responsibilities of paving the way, or sowing the seed of peace, for future generations in the region can live in harmony. Therefore, working closely with the people of Sudan is imperative. I'm happy to see the activities of the Water Salam, the activities of the Sahel, the Belika, and the activities of TESFA in this regard. And for this, of course, the regime change is an urgent necessity. And before I finish, I'm going to say a few words in Tigrinya. This is the return to our dream star. What we need to do in order to change not only the government, but to change ourselves. نصبح محل نستطيع نتقوى نزنها نتجسدي نهجاز نخلي نتلاحي مثلك نتلاحي نتفنى نرجع بارا ونستوعب مفواز نستجابين نحن تنحن بالنت. This is from my book, and you have the little Felsi there. And thank you for the family.
That was very amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Sorry, I was speaking while on mute. I was just saying thank you very much. Your presentation was amazing. The presentation was great and it took a little bit more time than was allotted for, but we didn't want to stop. So we took up all the time that was allotted for the presentation as well as the Q&A session. So yeah, with all due respect, I would not give you time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would love to ask a question, but
Okay, so I think we have really, really amazing presenters, really great. We're all engaged and related. It's really amazing. Our lunch time was supposed to be for 1 p.m., but it's too late because of like how we have not wanted everyone to stop presenting. We had questions and stuff. So the last presenter is going to be Barahat. My brother Barahat is here, and he's going to be introducing himself and also presenting. After that, we're going to break for lunch. So please give my brother Barahat a warm welcome.
Keep talking. Mhm.
All right, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. All right, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. My name is since our last name is
Mayroon na. Nagtahala.
and I've been in the specific and for one in the DC area. All right. Yeah, so the title I was given is the destabilizing nature of Sharia. And I'm sure most of the people who presented before me are thinking me because I sniped the easy one. So I can just finish it in 1 minute. Like the Sharia platform is be changed. And I have a seat now. So it's that easy. But in seriousness, I will try to go into the details of what makes us say BFJ regime or the Shishay regime is destabilizing factor or variable in our regime and also to the world, and why we yeah. So before we go to what makes a regime or government a stabilizing factor, I would like to go into details what makes it, what makes what is expected of a regime not to be destabilizing, but to live in peace with its neighbor and the rest of the world. So there are three, I mean, there are many, but I think three things that a regime must fulfill to do this. They are like respect for sovereignty and rule of law and non-intervention of affairs of countries. The next is dialogue and diplomacy and living in conflict resolving and economic cooperation. And the PFDJ regime fails in all these three. But before I go to what PFDJ did to destabilize the regime or the country as the main one of the fundamental principles of international relations does. The government's behavior internally reflects its conduct externally or vice versa. The government will act the way it will act internally will interact with the outside world. So I'll just give an indication of this presentation to those Eritreans who like how to be destabilized by this. And I just collected a few pictures in this presentation that I would like to bring on the lives of Eritreans who's like from like I don't know 30, 40 years whose life was destabilized. So I just gathered a few pictures from the internet, and these are names of some people whose life let me just read the names. This is what the current where Raham and Haile. The reason that okay. The reason that I brought these names up is first, these are lives of Eritreans who that were destabilized by the Eritrean regime, but also what they have in common is their lives were lost outside of Eritrea. This shows like the tentacles of the FDJ reach. Like these are not only the maybe like a handful numbers from those whose lives were lost, but these are lost outside of Eritrea. The security apparatus of this government, even when it was in the position of government, when it was at the front, had tentacles reaching out. So I just wanted to dedicate this chapter, and also Muhammad Ali Ibrahim. This was very recent. And the other thing is, when I was preparing for this presentation, I was just doing final text, and I looked at a YouTube channel called Ethiopia Forum, and I looked at the news that said Eritrea is printing bird without the knowledge of Ethiopian government, and I have to verify this, but the trend is very, very similar to what was happening in 1990s by the Eritrean regime. So look at this. They are intervening economically in the affairs of a neighboring country. And if you remember at that time, they were also allegedly ranked number 14 in coffee export of the world, where Ethiopia didn't make it. So we can understand that the government also intervenes not only security-wise, but also economically. And we can just, what we learned from here is that there is a trend. They have done this 25 years ago, a quarter of a century ago, and they are doing it now. And it's working for them. So what makes this is like, as a result of this game that they play, unsuspecting people bear the brunt of this cautious actions and strive of their means of sustenance, tranquility, and dignified livelihood. And this is not, as I say, this is not a coincidence. It is a testament of a recurring pattern, manifestation of the mindset firmly entrenched in the dogma or modus operandi of zero-sum game. So, but if we win, we lose, and to win, we have to get rid of the kind of mentality. And this, like the intervention, as I said, is we have to look at it from security point of view first, and also we look at it from economy. So I'll go to, I don't have a lot of data to show, but I have news articles to remind you of the time. And most of the things that I will talk, you already know, but to put it together in one, will give like a comprehensive action, and you can probably gather a trend out of it. So if you remember this news, former Sudanese leader, please here. And I happened to talk in 2001, when I was in Eritrea, somebody who I witnessed this, and he said like, there was a bewildering incident where like a convoy of land cruisers were like entering Eritrea from the border between Kassala and Tessamet, and he was like, what is happening? This is like a car chase. And it ended up being the former Sudanese Prime Minister, Sadat al-Mahdi, were being held by Eritrean security from home imprisonment in Khartoum and moved to Eritrea. This is like, what is happening? There's a security system inside a country and another country's security system, not only, and I'm not saying like he was a bad guy or a good guy or something, not to make judgment on his character, but when Eritrean security officers get into Khartoum, the capital of the neighboring country, not abduct because he was willing, but take a person, and the country is like, this is only in a movie, but this same security apparatus is the one that operates and chases Eritreans, because they have this, they have this means like machinations, monetary like capability and all. So it shows how deep it can get into the systems of neighboring countries. And I'll show you another one. Like this is just it amazes me how daring they do things. And then the next thing is at that time Eritrea and Sudan had severed their diplomatic relations. So Eritrea helped create this National Democratic Alliance, if you guys remember. Nothing wrong with creating alliance of opposition groups, but when you arm them and send them to the neighboring countries to fight and make war, then that is a problem. So just to remind you, remember, this is the guy who was leading the NDA. And I don't know if you can read it at the bottom. Al-Murani is the leader at that time, and he was the member of NDA. If you read the last statement, last in this presentation, but this was taken from Sudan Tribune. Al-Murani briefed the president on NDA's participation, and like, what is briefing briefing another country's affair to the president, like what is got, like you can see how deep they interview. And I started this with Sudan and just to get a pattern. And the other thing that they did with Sudan is like arming the opposition groups, that is the SPLM. And we all know, and I personally witnessed in 2003, that there was a military camp of the SPLM. This is not judging on the cause why the SPLA was fighting, but on the reason that Eritrea was arming the military wing of that and allowing its space. And most of you remember the wars in 1997, where Hamish Gorab, it's a Sudanese territory, was taken by SPLA, but actually friends of ours of the Ministry of National Service participated in that war, and they never surrendered Hamish Gorab until 2006 to the government of Sudan. So, like, not only armed, but also participated, taken part, and many people will remember the Togan Wars of April 1997. So, we're looking at the organization, the security system getting into a country, allowing the organization to work, and NDA was moved into the former Sudanese embassy. They ousted and they gave the office to the opposition, and then participated in the war. So this is like a destabilizing factor. And I'm by no means fan of the Sudanese regime at that time or its president, but when a country intervenes in another country, then there is something to say. Why do they do this? It's not as matter. If it was as a matter of strategy or as a matter of principle, then we can agree or disagree. But what they do is they don't support them to the point that they can win. No, they support them to the point that they can use them as a bargaining chips for the goal. So sometimes they push it and then they withdraw the support. So the opposition groups are being used as a bargaining chip or as a tools of aggression. So here's a news item from 2008. The Beja Congress slams the Eritrean negligence because they support them to start like an armed conflict, but they don't support them enough to go where they want. So this is a continuous limbo. We will see it in the Ethiopian sense, like they form an organization, they support them to a point, and then they start do not use them to the cause, but as a bargaining chip to bargain with the government. And the destabilizing variable is to push the government to get them to agree to something. And like otherwise, we will continue to destabilize kind of approach. So the next country that I would like to discuss is Ethiopia, just to make sure, I don't want to address from 2018 until now, not only because there is such a short period of time and it was addressed by many speakers before me, but also the gravity of how Eritrea intervened in Ethiopia and Tigray after 2018. Like the rest of my minutes will not be enough. But let's just say it's far now. There is no comparison to what Eritrea did in the last 3-4 years in Ethiopia, especially in the Tigray war of the last 3 years. So I'll just go back to the years before that. Here's a news item that I think, and these are like the benefits or TPDM armed forces that Eritrea was supporting. And I was looking at the Somalia Eritrea Monitoring Group report, and they interviewed their former chairman, and he said our budget was $450,000 a month, and they said like $30,000 a month, and Eritrea was financing this organization to that extent. Not, as I said, not for them to win, but to just destabilize So, like in the interest of time, I will not go deeper than that, but there was this organization, EPDM, and the other organization I saw was the, this is People's Alliance for Freedom and Democracy. And it looks like just one organization, but it was a combination of Benshangul People's Liberation Army, Gambela People's Liberation Army, Ogaden Liberation Front, Sidama National Liberation Front, and OLF. And by this time, I believe the OLF was disintegrated into 3 or 4 factions. So I think one of the OLFs was being frustrated. So if you look at the Eritrean government policy, they are destabilizing. One of the core objections is that if they can object, but one of the core disagreements they had with Ethiopia was the ethnic federalism. But then we look at all these new organizations. I mean, the ONLF, the Ogaden, and the Oromo Liberation Front were not new, but the Benshangul and Gambela were created during in Eritrea. So, like this is a testament of why they create these organizations to destabilize the region, not for them to further, because in principle they say they disagree with this ethnic based organization, political organization, but then they support such kind of organization. So this picture you see was one of the fanfare events when they had them in one, and then I think the coalition did last month. Another organization that they had was this Gumbot 7 and EPPF military wing when they merged. This is a picture when they merged, but it's Gumbot 7 was a remnant of the Kinijit organization. I think portion of them were moved to Eritrea and called themselves Gumbot 7. And EPPF is the Arabian March. And there was a news audio, and thanks to Amania, we had Hassan had broadcasted where the chairman of the Gumbot 7 said, like, we have been given almost $500,000 support from Ethiopia, and 200,000 of it was going to be spent on military. This is on audio by the current Minister of Education of Ethiopia. So Eritrea gave $200,000 to spend on military for Gumbot 7. And like there was 200 more for ISAT and 100 more for public diplomacy or something. But the extent that they go to restart the regime can be seen. And this audio was like one time. We don't know how often they do this kind of things. And the next thing I would like to discuss is the So what did Gumbot 7 or Albanian did? This is kind of a news item from like close to 6 years ago. Here is like they attacked the PLF soldiers. It says on the news, and then there was an attack in Arban in Ethiopia, and okay, I'll come back to this. But here is what they're doing is, especially this news item, the Gumbot 7 Albanians attacked Arban. Arban is on the south of Ethiopia. It's probably like 400 kilometers north of Kenya. And to have a military activity in that area, we have to assume that they must have come from the southern side of Ethiopia, from Kenya or somewhere like that. So if they come from Kenya, and one of the captured soldiers was interviewed by the Somalia monitoring group, and they said, we have stayed in Kenya. So not only did they stabilize Ethiopia, but also Kenya. So this is Eritrean government acting, destabilizing the region, Ethiopia and Kenya. And the other money that they spent was on ISAT. ISAT, as you can see, was a satellite TV. I believe it's registered in Netherlands, but its main operation was in DC. And to avoid being a hypocrite on my side, it's essential to accommodate the common intentions of some of the members of the media. However, the majority of the budget and the majority of the people were trying to spew hate against ethnic groups, and at some point they have openly announced that they would like to annihilate the people of Tigray. But who financed this? Eritrea. And they ended up being the mouthpiece of, as you can see in this image, this is one of their journalists when they visited Eritrea, and they ended up being mouthpieces of the Football. And this is in itself destabilizing factor. And like if ISAT is doing in Ethiopian land and Ethiopian media, it's not a matter of importance to us, but when Eritrea is financing this, then that is destabilizing. The next is, I mean, I can say a lot about this, but the next is, have you seen this picture before? It was posted on New York Times. The two soldiers are Eritrean and Djiboutian soldiers on the front line. The distance that they had was like a gun barrel distance. That's how they said it. It's New York Times. What they this is around 2008. The Djiboutian government was accused of being very pro-Ethiopia, and all the port income that Djibouti was getting was supposed to be for Eritrea. There was no conflict, so some kind of envy. I mean, there is no political term for it, but some kind of envy arose in the ranks of the Eritrean government. So what they did, they started a war with Djibouti, and I'll come back to a trend that came with this, but they started a war, and even if they couldn't push or get pushed, the sense that they create, the sense of insecurity that they create could diminish the trade system or the stability of Djibouti, and that was the intention, I believe. They were not going to go to war with Djibouti when it's supported by me. But in that time, they started to support a Djiboutian opposition group, Front for Restoration by the Unity and I think called group. They had a combatant army, and they were trying to support that. So Djibouti, and the next, the next thing that I would like to speak is Somalia, and there has been many incidents and many documented activities that the Eritrean government did against Somalia. Some of them were couldn't find any proof, but one thing that was undisputed even by government of Kenya was like in November of 2011, a flight came to Baidoa full of armaments, and it was alleged that it came from Eritrea, and there were many evidences, and it was included in the Eritrea-Somalia monitoring group. So I can conclude that there is some kind of threat. You destabilize the nation, you create an opposition group that will start the fight, and also so you destabilize the nation, and people would ask, where did this army people come from, especially the ones from Ethiopia? And here is another destabilizing factor. During the war of 1998 to 2000, there were Ethiopian soldiers in Eritrea. Some of them voluntarily surrendered. some of them were prisoners of war. So the voluntary surrendered ones, they were immediately taken into Shabai near Abadat, and they were made to be distributed in this newly minted Ethiopian opposition groups, either by Shangul or Sidama or Neref, or like if they are Amara, they join the Arbenich. So here is, and then the prisoners of war were not allowed visit of the ICRC, the International Red Cross, until the war ended in 2000. And by then, with the preceding 3 years, people out of despair started joining these organizations. And then after the ICRC visit became open, and some of them did return to Ethiopia and some of them remained. But the same thing started to happen when the conflict arose with Djibouti. Djibouti claims even now there are prisoners of war in Eritrea that hasn't been allowed to be accessed by ICRC or other organizations. So treating prisoners of war is one of the Geneva Conventions, rules of war. And here is an incident where it was not respected. So I think in this brief minute, I have like checked Sudan, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, and a little bit of Kenya. And I don't have time to list the economic intervention that Eritrea is doing in South Sudan. There is a whole list of things. So it's intervening in all countries' affairs of religions. Guess what? It's doing it and other countries' affairs. This is from 2014, and this is a high-level delegation of Eritrea visiting Crimea in 2014. For this, the Ukrainian foreign minister had posted a formal protest, but they neglected it because Crimea at that time was just occupied by Russia, and they had to go the other way around to and even at that time, it was not even formally joined to Russia. So this is what they do. These are another ones like the Bridgemen. There were sailors that were held in Eritrea, and this is actually a good example. I'll come back to it. But there was another incident that we mentioned, and this is the Great Lakes region of Africa, the Congo War. Eritrea participated by providing armaments to Lauren Kabila, and whether so what we're doing is that we're not judging the justness or not so justness of the code. We're saying, should a country intervene in other countries' affairs with at least with military? So it wasn't attended. So this is the title that I chose for this one was Eritrea, the unattended menace, or maybe the phantom menace. So this is it's not attended, but out of all this, one of the victims, I don't want to say victims, but one of the affected parties attended this in a serious manner, and then they responded. And I'll take you back to this. If you can read this one. When the British sailors were detained in Eritrea, Henry Bellingham, I believe he was the foreign minister at that time, warned Eritrea it would take a robust action if it was not granted consular access. That's when they were. So every time statements are released, or every time like State Department comes up with a report, country report, they don't care. But when you tell them that a robust action is going to be taken from you, that's when they react. They immediately release them, no force, no guilty, not guilty, no mercy, no, just release them immediately. So we can see there is a trend that they respond to. And just to see that this is the integrated country strategy of United States for public release. It was released literally over a year ago last year. And one of the mission goals was, and as you can see, this was May 5, 2000. And it says, limit Eritrea's ability to undermine the stability of the whole. And this is like a year ago. How do you think this failed? I'll let you be the judge. The second is even more funny because it says making a kind of pushing or suggesting Eritrea does not object or block US global initiatives. How many votes did Eritrea vote against the US? Had this worked? Or how, like it says, negotiated to end a conflict in northern Ethiopia, and then it says countering Russian aggression in Europe. This is even more funnier because a year later they went the opposite direction and resisting Chinese efforts to terminate the UN. And like we cannot say Eritrea was or was not, but like the last visit to China, the president's visit to China was indirect contradiction to this. So what did the United States do when its policies are like opposite in this way? Nothing. So I mean, at least for now, we haven't seen anything. But we can suggest a couple of things, and this will be if I'm taking on among my last conclusion. So I have read quite a few on the situation, on like, how these things can be handled. The easiest low-hanging fruit that we can ask is there was a United Nations Security Council resolution 2023 that was issued in 2011. It was Eritrea was let go from it in 2018 because for good behavior, I believe. But little did we know, it didn't show us that good behavior. So the easiest low-hanging fruit is like to ask the to get it reinstated. That sanction needs to be reinstated, and that is not a solution by itself, but it's a low-hanging fruit. The next is we should ask the diplomatic movement, the restriction of the movement of their diplomatic powers. Many countries do it because this destabilizing nature of Eritrea is done and coordinated by the embassies, consular offices, and all. So this needs to be the restriction of this diplomatic movement of these diplomatic bodies needs to be controlled. And every country has the right to just not severe diplomatic or something, but just the DC ambassador will only be allowed in the vicinities of his office, like this, some miles within office. And that's I believe not too big task. The next is with all these destabilizing efforts and all these activities that Eritrea does, it's an anomaly that Eritrea is a member of the United Nations Human Rights Commission.
Oh my God.
It's like it decides on issues, and it's funny. Russia was a member until very recently, and the United Nations senators discussed it, and it was removed. Eritrea is worse. It needs to be removed because these kind of platforms allow it for it to make statements and to appear. The platform is an activity that needs to be addressed. The next is the mining companies. If they are not, this was also part of the monitoring group activity that this was doing. The mining companies proceeds. We need to make sure that it's not spent on abusing the people. So some kind of monitoring, like sourcing all these mines that came from the China, especially just like what they do with blood diamonds, right? So it needs to be some kind of like a determination needs to be made. And it goes without saying we should demand the release of all political and faith-based prisoners. And all this will not help. All this will just help our struggle or way to come to some kind of platform and move to the next step. The key solution is the regime change. The regime change needs to be. I've not taken much of the time.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Haptin here. So I'm wondering, when there was the coalition of oppressed peoples of Ethiopia, why was Tigray not part of that? How you brought up the coalition of oppressed people in Ethiopia, how you brought up the Gambela people, the Oromos, what have you. Why was Tigray not included in that? Why are they not working with them?
That's a good question. These people the army people that you see is temple. I think democracy will us with the guy. The people that I brought are those political organizations funded by Eritrean government and acting against the state of Ethiopia. Some of them have, like, I am a huge supporter of the Oromo rights for
Me too.
determination, and so is the Tigray people. And the oppression is real, and some kind of struggle within the bounds of like civility is necessary. Why Eritrea did not include with Tigray fighters with the rest of the Ethiopian fighters? I can only guess, just like you. Like, it's a strategy that they did, and some people say the TPDM itself is the truth. Some of them say if they unite, it will have another impact. We can only guess, but the oppression in Ethiopia, although different than one in Eritrea, there was, and it affected everybody in Ethiopia. That helped.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Barahat. This was really an amazing presentation. We appreciate you. So everyone in Zoom, you can pause and go grab lunch or coffee or anything, depending on where you are. We're going to be breaking this meeting for, I want to say 30 minutes for lunch. So feel free to go for now. Let me mute us. Now that they're muted, I want everyone to come closer because we're trying to take pictures for media. So everyone, please come together so the pictures will be more beautiful.
سلام زغير خبركم تغادرتي ناي مساح كيزي سلازلو دحري اترون كن جمرنا دحري ساعه طبيلنا راخب نخرينا حنا مدباب زودينا لنا راخبينا هذا ساعه طبيلنا مالت كيف ما
لو تخينا مسكو نوفل لنا نفريه بنا كنتبع لنا سبسي اي تفرحي نحق فرح نزقيها فرحي
já segue o pandeiro.